Chapter 202. Yang Chendong was so cooperative. Not only did he agree, but he also did not go personally. This greatly exceeded Jin Ying's expectations. He had originally thought that even if he agreed, he would go along and reap the benefits. Of course, Yang Chendong would not go with them. This was what Jin Ying wanted to see. He did not stand on ceremony. In that case, I'll have to trouble you, Duke of Loyalty. Haha, no problem, no problem. Seeing that Jin Ying did not invite him to go with them, Yang Chendong looked at him with annoyance. He could even imagine that once Zhu Qiyu really contacted the mercenaries, she would immediately kick him out. She might even find a crime to confiscate his family property. This was the scheming of an emperor. Sometimes, the emperor would turn hostile and refuse to acknowledge the other party's kindness. However, no matter how much Zhu Qiyu calculated, he would never have thought that the real mastermind behind the mercenaries was Yang Chendong. His methods would be useless in the end. In fact, it was not just Zhu Qiyu. None of the old foxes in the imperial court would have thought that the mercenaries, who had such advanced firearms, would have anything to do with a young man who was not even 20 years old. It was precisely because no one could guess that Yang Chendong did not cause everyone to boycott him in advance. Jin Ying left happily. Tiger's Mane followed Yang Chendong's orders and accompanied him to the courtyard of the mercenaries' barracks. Yang Chendong had mentioned this when he met with Commander Longsong and the others yesterday. Once they won the battle and displayed their great strength, the emperor of the Great Ming dynasty would certainly think of a way to contact them and deepen their relationship. This was something that would be difficult to avoid. Instead of thinking of all sorts of ways and excuses to avoid it, it was better to meet them openly. In any case, there would be no promises. On the contrary, there would be some benefits. Why not? Jin Ying did not know about this. He only knew that if he had the chance to meet with the mercenaries alone, as long as he could establish a good relationship with them and make them work for him, it would infinitely increase his authority. In this way, even in front of the emperor, Zhu Qiyu, he would be able to speak with more confidence. Led by Tiger's Man, Jin Ying brought a group of embroidered uniform guards and a young eunuch from the palace to the courtyard of the mercenaries' military camp. With Yang Chendong's previous instructions, the group naturally entered without a hitch. Here, Jin Ying met the leader of the mercenaries for the first time, Longsong, whom the soldiers addressed as commander. Although she didn't know what the commander's official title was, seeing how respectful the others were towards Longsong, Jin Ying's intuition told her that there would only be benefits and no harm in getting closer to this person. Immediately, his face bloomed like a flower as he quickly stepped forward and took the initiative to greet Longsong. Aya, Commander Long is indeed a man of striking appearance. You are young and promising. You truly make me envious. As soon as he arrived in front of Longsong, he listened to everything that was good. Longsong, who had long been prepared and had a certain understanding of eunuchs, said with a straight face, "Are you the leader of the eunuchs by the great Ming Emperor's side? Very good. Since the items have been delivered, you may leave." Longsong's expression was so resolute and cold that Jin Ying's expression changed after hearing it. What kind of person was he? He was Zhu Qiyu's favorite. To put it bluntly, if he didn't like anyone now, he only needed to say a word in front of Daizong. Even if that person didn't die, they would lose a layer of skin. Other people couldn't wait to curry favor with him. Who would dare to speak to him in such a tone? However, Longsong had done so, and yet he still didn't have the slightest bit of temper. He didn't dare to show Longsong any displeasure, and he didn't even dare to say a single harsh word. This made Jin Ying's heart tighten. However, he was someone who was used to being a eunuch. He had suffered many grievances, so the speed at which he stabilized his state of mind was still very fast. After adjusting his state of mind, he looked at Longsong and said with the same smile, "Commander Long, I am here on behalf of the great Ming Emperor to thank you all. Sending these foods is merely a small token of our sincerity. My emperor's intention is for me to come and see if there is anything lacking here. If you have any requests, feel free to ask." Jin Ying appeared to be very heroic. As long as they could rope in mercenaries, they felt that paying a certain price was necessary and worth it. Jin Ying even had a bold idea, and that was to use mercenaries to deal with Zhu Qizhen of Ing sect and complete the great matter of the Great Ming dynasty's unification. Lung Song silently looked at Jining. The sixth young master was truly a godly person. 2 days ago, he had already guessed that after winning the battle, Zhu Qizhan of Ying's sect would spend money to rope him in. Wasn't this happening now? Since such a good thing had been delivered to him, how could he not accept it? Lung Song, who had been very cold, suddenly smiled. In Jin Ying's eyes, this smile was like 100 flowers blooming. It actually made him feel as if his heart was bursting with joy. Eunuch Jin is too polite. Since this is the case, how much can the great Ming Emperor give us if we lack copper and iron? He actually made a request. Jin Ying was overjoyed. He knew that this was very likely a way to strengthen the bond between him and the mercenaries. Not to mention copper and iron. As long as the great Ming dynasty had it, they probably wouldn't be stingy in the slightest. Well said, well said. The mercenaries have helped us defend against foreign enemies, so you are our best friends. Whatever you need, we will find a way to satisfy you. Since Jin Ying had agreed so readily, Lung Song naturally had to express his gratitude. He laughed heartily and invited the other party into the depths of the barracks. On the surface, the relationship between the two sides seemed to be quickly warming up. Jin Ying and Lung Song took this opportunity to get to know each other better and reached a certain consensus. When he left, Jin Ying's face was filled with excitement, as if an old tree had just bloomed. When the other junior eunuchs saw this, they felt an inexplicable sense of fear. They seemed to have seen eunuch Jin Ying regain his manly vigor. He was probably going to find them at any time to have some fun. There were many times when the world of eunuchs was unknown to outsiders, and they couldn't understand it. Perverted people often had many perverted methods, and these methods were often used to make senior eunuchs happy, while the junior eunuchs had nothing left to live for. Not long after Jin Ying left, an inconspicuous man dressed as a woodcutter walked out from the rear courtyard of the barracks, heading straight for the immortal abode. No one knew that this inconspicuous man was a secret agent from the Security Bureau. He wanted to report the details of Lung Song and Jin Ying's conversation to the sixth young master. In the palace, Jin Ying was delighted to see Zhu Qiyu. She then truthfully reported to Zhu Qiyu what she had discussed with Commander Lung. Your Majesty, this subject has already found out that the headquarters of the mercenaries are at sea, on a large ship. They don't have a fixed residence and will go wherever they are needed. Most of the mercenaries are from the Great Ming dynasty, but because they can't survive under the harsh governance of the local officials, they have no choice but to take the risk and seek a living at sea. Jin Ying proudly told Zhu Qiyu everything she knew about the mercenaries, those corrupt officials. When Zhu Qiyu heard this, his face was filled with anger. For such talented people to be chased out of the country, those local officials were the sinners of the country. Yes, corrupt officials should be killed. But if it weren't for their actions, these people would only be decent soldiers at best. Without advanced firearms, they would be no different from the ordinary soldiers of the Great Ming dynasty. Through her understanding of Zhu Qiyu over the past few days, Jin Ying had more or less seen through him. This emperor was the type who had great ambitions. He truly wanted to become a famous ruler and strengthen the Great Ming dynasty. However, some things couldn't be changed by one's will. If he truly wanted to revive the Great Ming dynasty, there were still too many things that needed to be done. How to strengthen the Great Ming dynasty was a grand goal to begin with. It was difficult to explain in a short amount of time. Jin Ying wanted to talk about the problem at hand. So Gu Qing continued, Your Majesty, it's because of the advanced firearms that these mercenaries possess undefeatable battle prowess. From chatting with Commander Lung Song, this subject found out that it was because the loyal Marquis had unintentionally made a business deal with them that he gained their basic trust. For example, most of the goods sold in heavens beyond heaven were provided by the mercenaries. After Yang Chendong obtained them, he sold them at a high price to the merchants and commoners of the Great Ming dynasty. Speaking of which, he's the blood-sucking one of the most corrupt officials. That's right. Although the loyal Marquis is young, his ambitions aren't small. This person isn't easy to get along with. If there's an opportunity in the future, we have to think of a way to get rid of him. Zhu Qiyu nodded in agreement. Ever since he ascended the throne, Yang Chendong had been demanding things from him. He didn't behave like a subject should. It was precisely because Yang Chendong protected his imperial brother, Zhu Qizhan, that the great Ming dynasty was suddenly split into two halves. Although he did contribute to the defense of the capital this time, how much money did he get from the great Ming dynasty's treasury and how much imperial property? A subject who profited from the country's war was truly infuriating and deserved to be killed. If it weren't for the fact that the defense of the capital was imminent, in a fit of anger, he might have already issued a decree to kill Yang Chendong. Seeing that the emperor was full of loathing for the loyal marquis, Jining Nai felt a burst of joy in his heart. This was exactly what he wanted. Yang Chendong's wealth and influence were simply too tempting. If he could get rid of this person, the profits would definitely not be small. Most importantly, if he got rid of this person, he would be able to privately contact the mercenaries and become the link and bridge between them and the great Ming dynasty's commerce. At that time, would he still have to worry about a steady flow of money? Yes, Your Majesty is right. However, these are all trivial matters at the moment. How to maintain a close relationship with the mercenaries is the most important thing. This subject thinks like this. First, we need to get closer to each other so that they won't have any ideas about us. Second, we need to make them work for us. With their support and assistance, it won't be difficult to drive away Walla or defeating Zhong. We can even buy a large number of advanced firearms from them. It won't be impossible for us to expand our territory and strengthen our great Ming. Chapter 203. Zhu Qiyu's blood surged when he heard Jin Ying's words. Wasn't this person talking about his life goal? When he heard that he could buy a large amount of advanced firearms from the mercenaries, he became even more excited. Beloved official, are they really willing to sell such advanced firearms to us? Zhu Qiyu couldn't be blamed for asking this question. The mercenaries' strength lay in their advanced firearms. If everyone used the same level of weapons, the great Ming dynasty, which had sufficient soldiers, could destroy the mercenaries in minutes. Selling one's foundation to others was a short-sighted action. Zhu Qiyu didn't think that this matter was very feasible. It's possible. Your Majesty, to be honest, this subject also thought that it was impossible. However, when Commander Long mentioned that he needed a large amount of copper and iron, this subject casually mentioned that Your Majesty was very interested in the advanced firearms in their hands. Unexpectedly, Commander Lung agreed on the spot that as long as we could provide them with the materials they needed, he would personally gift us an advanced firearm as a tribute to Your Majesty. As for the need for more firearms, he would need to return to the sea and report to his leader before he could make a decision. When Jining said this, he was eloquent and eloquent. From the looks of it, he was clearly trying to show off his achievements. Is that really possible? That's great. This way, we can give them as much copper and iron as they need, as long as we have them in our national treasury. Although we can only get one first, we have a lot of skilled craftsmen in the great Ming dynasty. So, we will be able to imitate them very soon. At that time, we will be able to sweep the world. Ha ha ha. Zhu Qiyu's brain reacted very quickly. At this moment, he seemed to be able to see many advanced firearms at his disposal and the scene of him conquering the world. Yes, this subject understands. Seeing that Zhu Qiyu had agreed, Jining also sighed in relief. Previously, he had agreed to the other party's request for copper and iron without asking the emperor for permission. He was afraid that he would be blamed. Now, it seemed that he didn't need to worry. But then again, in order to obtain an advanced firearm and the friendship of the mercenaries, the price they had paid this time was too great. Just the copper and iron alone was promised to be 1,000,000 tons. This was already 3/5 of the amount in the great Ming dynasty's national treasury, and it had been accumulated since the time when they became ancestors. Looking at it this way, the capital they paid was too much. But when he thought about the friendship between the two countries and an advanced firearm, it seemed to be worth it. Immortal abode. The information from the Security Bureau was sent to Yang Chendong. Ha ha ha, very good, it's done. In the study, Yang Chendong's joyful laughter could be heard. There were a lot of science and technology books stored in the warehouse. They were supposed to be distributed to the troops for them to study. Now, Yang Chendong took out a portion of it and gave it to the researchers in Crimson City. Those people were originally 1 in 1,000 talents. Now that they had the materials they could learn from, they could do things with half the effort. The development of the city was changing day by day. With ready-made firearms and detailed books, It was not difficult for him to not improve. The only thing that hindered its development was the lack of raw materials. For this matter, Yang Chendong had even made preparations to attack the Japanese Empire. As everyone knew, the Japanese Empire was located in the middle of the ocean and was made up of several islands. Because of its special geographical location, they had a lot of gold and steel mines. These were the things that Yang Xie needed to develop. However, the Ryukyu kingdom had not been completely stabilized. If he sent troops to the Japanese Empire now, he would feel that he was stretched thin, which was why it had not taken shape yet. In the end, there was too little time, and the number of troops in Yang Xie's army was too small. Since he could not immediately attack the Japanese Empire, Yang Chendong had to reconsider where he could get more copper and iron for Crimson City's development. After thinking about it, his target was still the great Ming dynasty. He wondered if he could use Zhu Qiyu's eagerness to make a fuss. Lung Song did not disappoint. After negotiating with Jin Ying, he managed to get 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron. With these things, it could be imagined that the problem of Crimson City's raw materials had been temporarily solved. How could he not be happy? As for whether or not the great Ming dynasty would replicate the advanced firearms, Yang Chendong was not too worried. Even with a ready-made firearm, it would take a long time to replicate it. When that time came, who knew what the situation would be like? Who knew? Who knew? Without the corresponding books and guidance of others, who knew how long it would take to create a new firearm just by relying on a finished product? Who knew how many detours there would be? As for what could be done with this advanced firearm, without the corresponding bullets, it was just a decoration and could not threaten anyone. The important thing was that he had obtained 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron. Moreover, Zhu Qiyu had personally agreed to it. Even if it was shipped out of the capital to the sea, it would still be justified. Just as he was thinking about how Jining had helped him greatly, more intelligence from the Security Bureau arrived. It was an intelligence report on the Walla's army. It had to be said that the Walla cavalry was truly an elite force. Not only did they charge quickly, they also fled quickly. It had not been long since the battle in the morning, but their deserters had already retreated 300 li and found the main force of the Walla's army. According to the intelligence report, the Walla's army only had 60,000 soldiers, but it was said to be 200,000. After reorganizing the vanguard that had escaped, they were rapidly marching toward the capital. Of the 50,000 soldiers, there were 40,000 cavalry and 10,000 infantry. It had to be said that the steppe truly was rich in healthy horses. In this aspect, the great Ming dynasty could not compare. In the absence of modern chariots, Yang Chendong was also considering building a cavalry team. He had even prepared a candidate. It was a young man named Windchaser. This person had lived on the steppe since he was young and was extremely familiar with horses. Even more amazing was that he even understood horse language and could communicate with healthy horses in an extremely short amount of time. With such talent, he should have been able to do well on the steppe. However, fate played a little joke on him. Because his mother was quite beautiful, the leader of the local tribe took a fancy to her. First, he killed his father. Then he took his mother by force, forcing his staunch mother to die on the spot. At the time, Zhu Feng was only 12 years old. In a fit of rage, he killed the leader and took revenge for his parents. Then, he rode a healthy horse and fled to the Central Plains. After fleeing for 6 years, he coincidentally joined the Yang Xie's new army. A while ago, Zhu Feng had already passed the strict test of the Cold Front and was approved by the commander, Lung Song, to bring the 9 Cold Front members back to the steppe. He used his status as the squad leader to gather information and secretly accumulate strength. The matter of Zhu Feng only flashed through his mind. The main force of the Walla was already here. How to deal with them was the problem that Yang Chendong needed to consider. With the death of the Vanguard Army's Journal King, he was afraid that they would not listen to his orders to set up a formation in front of the city and wait for his roll call. It was very likely that when the city gates opened, they would all rush into the city. If that was the case, it would be difficult to control the situation with just the 400 Cold Front members. Therefore, not letting the enemy enter the city was a prerequisite. Defending the city did not satisfy Yang Chendong. He needed to attack and not passively defend. The great Ming dynasty could not allow the Mongol tribes to bully them. If they could only defend when they were at their doorstep, This was definitely a disgrace. Take the initiative to attack and kill our way out. This thought quickly flashed through Yang Qindong's mind. He got up and went next door. There, Tiger's Mane and the others had already set up a reconstruction sand table based on the information from the Security Bureau. Striding in front of the sand table, Yang Qindong's gaze swept across the table. One plan after another was quickly formed or rejected. Gradually, the battle plan became more and more mature. Walla Army Camp. After attacking for an entire night, it could be said that the men and horses were tired. Most of the soldiers were resting in their tents. However, as the leader, Yeshin could not sleep. He was holding an impromptu meeting with his generals to consider the upcoming battle with the great Ming dynasty. Participating in the meeting was his other brother, Borimo, the general's grandfather, and other tall Mongol warriors with a valiant aura. Everyone, the news of the Journal King's defeat and death should be known to everyone. What do you think? As the de facto leader of Walla, Yeshin had a dignified aura. Compared to the great Ming dynasty, the people of Walla acted more rudely and directly. As soon as Yeshin finished speaking, the general's grandfather took the initiative to stand up and loudly said, "Leader, we have the world's fastest horses and superb riding and archery skills. We only need to rush into the great Ming dynasty's capital. With our warriors, who can stop us?" As for the periodical king being killed, I think he simply wanted to imitate the Han people and hold a meeting before the battle. This gave the other side the opportunity to be attacked by our unknown hidden weapons. It's nothing to worry about. The general's grandfather was a famous warrior in Walla. He was known for his extraordinary strength and superb archery skills. After many military achievements, he was favored by Yeshin. Naturally, when he spoke, there was no need to worry so much. Yes, we only need to kill with our army. At that time, no matter what the other side has, they will not be able to succeed. Facing Emperor Zong's 500,000 troops, we can win. Now, there are only 10,000 enemies. It is not enough to worry about. After the general's grandfather took the lead, the other generals also shouted loudly and expressed their opinions. Chapter 204. These generals were mostly brave warriors. Perhaps they wouldn't have any problems fighting on the battlefield, but when it came to strategizing, they were far too lacking. Yeshin lightly shook his head. He wasn't as straightforward as the other Mongolians. Instead, he was a cunning Walla leader, as cunning as a rabbit. During the Battle of the Tumu Fortress, it was because of his cautiousness and caution that they were able to achieve a great victory. Since the periodical king had already been defeated and even died, he naturally wouldn't recklessly advance. He wasn't very satisfied with the words of these martial artists. Instead, he turned his gaze to his younger brother, Boromeo. Boromeo and the periodical king were both Yeshin's younger brothers. However, their personalities were completely different. The latter was fond of grandiose achievements and liked to take everything for granted. However, he was a man of few words and usually gave off a gloomy feeling. It wasn't that Boromeo wasn't good at talking. On the contrary, he was a person who planned before taking action. He was used to observing others and then making the most correct decision based on everyone's performance. However, those who were good at observing others generally had very accurate intuition. When he felt Yeshin's gaze on him, his expression became serious. "Elder brother, this subject brother also thinks that General Nigong and the others are right. Our current advantage is that we have a strong army. As long as we take a steady approach, taking down the Great Ming's capital will be just around the corner." How do we take a steady approach? Yeshin, who valued his younger brother's opinion very much, asked. In the words of the Han people, it's called step by step. Obviously, Boromeo had already thought of a countermeasure. When his elder brother asked, he gave the answer without hesitation. Step by step? Yeshin was very interested in this idea. Tell me in detail. Yes. In fact, the method is very simple. In order to prevent the Great Ming's defeat from happening to us, we can take a divided approach. That is, one army will be at the front, one army in the middle, and one army will be at the back. This way, no matter which army is attacked, we can look after each other and support each other. If we don't encounter any attacks along the way, We will enter the great Ming dynasty's capital in batches. Remember, don't learn from the king of magazines. Don't stop, just focus on attacking. If there's really a problem, just turn around and retreat. The army behind you will naturally support you. Not bad, not bad. Yeshen nodded in agreement when he heard Bormo's opinion. By dividing the army into 3 groups, it was guaranteed that no matter what went wrong, Walla's main force would still be there, and the army would not be completely wiped out. Yeshen laughed heartily when he realized the benefits of the art of war. All right, we'll do as you say. How about this? General Nigong will take 10,000 men as the vanguard, that child Borromeo will take 20,000 men as the center, and this chief will bring up the rear to ensure everyone's safety.
Yes.
After receiving the order, the generals placed their right hands in front of their chests and saluted Yeshen. There was a change in the strategy. The Walla army that was supposed to arrive at the capital at dusk on the second day did not arrive as scheduled. On the contrary, the Security Bureau personnel sent out ran until 3 horses died and sent back important news. The Walla army was actually advancing toward the capital in 3 groups. In the mercenary compound, Yang Chendong, Commander Longsong, and the others were waiting for news from the front lines. This time, the main force of the Walla army was coming. It would be very difficult to use the previous method of naming to deal with them. This time, it would be a hard battle of saber against saber, spear against spear. Emperor Zhu Qiyu had already sent people to inquire about the situation more than once. Even eunuch Jining had taken the initiative to come once. Because of Yang Qindong's presence, he left after a brief exchange of greetings. Lung Song had told him before that it was best not to let the loyalty marquis know about their deal. Otherwise, based on the fact that this person had an extremely good relationship with the leader of the mercenaries, it was very likely that he would interfere and ruin the plan. Of course, this was Yang Qindong's idea. Even his cooperation with Zhu Qiyu had to be as mysterious as possible. In his view, the more mysterious something was, the more people would believe it was real and would not be suspicious. As expected, Jin Ying listened to Lung Song's words. When he saw Yang Qindong here, he took the initiative to leave. Before leaving, he gave Lung Song a look that only the 2 of them could understand. Yang Qindong had seen this out of the corner of his eye, but he still pretended not to see it. While everyone was waiting, the Security Bureau finally sent back news. When they learned that the Walla army had not gathered together and had instead divided into 3 groups, Yang Qindong wanted to throw his head back and laugh. Previously, he had been worried that the Tile army would launch a collective attack. If that was the case, with the 10,000 great Ming soldiers under his command and the 400 cold vanguard soldiers, it would truly be difficult to ensure the safety of the 12 gates of the capital. As for going out to look for opportunities, the difference in numbers was too great. It was difficult to say whether they could protect themselves and annihilate the enemy. Since he was leading the army into battle, if he only wanted to win, his expectations were too low. What Yang Qindong wanted was a complete victory. He wanted to obtain the greatest victory with the least losses. It was indeed very difficult to achieve this. However, now that the Walla had taken the initiative to divide their forces, the situation was completely different. After dividing their forces, the Walla's advantage in numbers was gone. Yang Qindong could fight according to his plans. He strode to the sand table and looked at the 3-dimensional map that was almost engraved in his mind twice with his bright eyes. He suddenly pointed at a place called Willowtown and said, "It's here. Let's encircle the enemy and attack the reinforcements." Encircle the enemy and attack the reinforcements? Lung Song and the others were all excited when they heard this. Their eyes flashed. Yang Qindong had once introduced encircling the enemy and attacking the reinforcements in the tactical learning class. This was an effective method to annihilate the enemy. It would only be used when the enemy's numbers exceeded a certain level. When everyone was still thinking about the essence of encircling the enemy and attacking the reinforcements, Yang Qindong took a pointer and pointed at the sand table and said, "Everyone look, this place is called Willowtown. The local people call it Willow Ditch. There is only one main road in the town that runs from east to west. The north and south sides are filled with huge ditches. There was a heavy rain a while ago, so there should be a lot of water in the ditches. Immediately send people there. If the ditches in the north and south are filled, immediately inform the people there to evacuate." With a resolute voice, Yang Chendong gave the military order. At the same time, Tiger's Mane had already walked out of the meeting room and arranged for fast horses to investigate the situation in Willow Town. When the scouts come back with the specific information, we will hold a meeting overnight and then make preparations overnight. We have less than 24 hours to prepare. I hope everyone will be alert. Yang Chendong's gaze swept across Longsong, Xiaofeng, Tengshan, Wushang, and the others. Yes, everyone's bodies quickly tensed up and stood at attention. At the same time, their eyes lit up. Generals were never afraid of war. Although they also hoped for world peace, their mission made them never shrink back when war came. In their hearts, they even hoped to achieve great things on the battlefield. The scouts left the city in the night. Now that the 5 city warden departments were under Yang Chendong's command, it was very easy to send people out of the city. For hours later, the fast horses came back from Willow Town, which was 30 li away. They reported that the ditches were filled with water, and that the ditches were 2 zhang wide and 1 zhang deep. Inform Vice Commander Yang Chendong and the 5 commanders to come here for a meeting. Hearing that the situation was as he had expected, Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with determination. Not long after the order was given, Yang Guang's group of 6 arrived at the mercenaries' courtyard. This was the first time they had walked in here, so they were a bit nervous. After all, to the outside world, this army was too mysterious. It was so mysterious that even they did not know much about it. The dark night added a bit of mystery to the courtyard. The 6 people followed the torches that led them to the meeting room, so they did not see their surroundings clearly. When they entered the brightly lit meeting room, the 6 people lost their ability to observe their surroundings. All of this was because Yang Chendong, dressed in green, was standing in front of them. Ever since the previous time when he completely defeated Walla's vanguard, Yang Chendong had the title of War God. He enjoyed a very high status and influence in the army. After this matter, Tao Jin, Yang Jie, Mao Fushou, and Gao Li all regretted it. They originally thought that with a war on the horizon, staying in the capital to maintain law and order was a very safe job. If the situation turned bad, they could immediately escape from the capital. But who would have thought that the defeated Great Ming army would be able to display such power in the hands of the loyal Marquis? This was great. They had defeated the enemy effortlessly and obtained military merits, but they didn't get any credit at all. Their hearts were extremely unbalanced, so they made up their minds that they would participate in the next war no matter what. When they saw Yang Chendong, a feeling of respect naturally flowed out from the bottom of their hearts. You're all here. Looking at Yang Guang's group of 6, Yang Chendong nodded slightly. His gaze then landed on Tao Jin's group of 4 as he asked, "Everyone, the battle is imminent. It's better if you each lead some men to guard the city and maintain law and order." No, no, no. When Tao Jin's group of 4 heard that they were going to be excluded again, how could they be willing? They immediately shook their heads like a rattled drum, and their faces instantly became very ugly. "Oh, so you're saying that you want to participate in the war?" Yang Chendong asked with a surprised expression. In fact, this result was already within his expectations. Since there were benefits, who would stand by and do nothing? Chapter 205. Yes, we want to join the war. Tao Jin and the other 3 held their chests high, as if they were using their actions to tell Yang Chendong that they were men, and they were also the young generals of the 5 cities warden's office. Seeing that the 4 of them were so determined, Yang Chendong nodded his head. Since you want to join the war, Marquis can agree to it. But there is one thing that needs to be emphasized. On the battlefield, no matter who it is, they must obey military orders. If anyone disobeys, they will be punished by military law and beheaded without mercy. Yang Chendong spoke seriously, but Tao Jin and the other 4 were even more serious. They nodded their heads solemnly, indicating that they would listen to Yang Chendong's orders and arrangements. Since that is the case, come over, I will announce the battle plan. Yang Chendong turned around and walked towards the sand table. He held a pointer in his hand and pointed at the sand table as he spoke of the battle situation and issued orders. According to the scouts, Walla's army is divided into 3 groups and is heading towards the capital. The first group is a vanguard of 10,000 cavalry, led by General Walla's grandfather. Marquis has seriously studied this man. He is a man who is not afraid of death. His personality is straightforward, and he kills without blinking an eye on the battlefield. But usually, this kind of person will not beat around the bush. If Marquis did not guess wrongly, he will definitely take the shortest route to the capital tomorrow. Then Willowtown will be his only route. Willowtown, there is only one road from east to west. There are more than 2,000 people and more than 500 families in the town. The south and north of the town are surrounded by two ditches that are 2 zhang wide and 1 zhang deep respectively. It can be said that once we enter the town, as long as we block both ends, there will be no other way out. And what we need to do is to block them here. Tangshan, Taojin, Gaoli, where are you? We are here. The 3 people who were called out stepped forward and came in front of Yang Chendong. Marquis ordered that Tao Jin and Gaoli each take 1,000 soldiers. Tangshan, take 100 men from your 3rd company and set up a defense at the exit of Willowtown. Remember, your mission is to block the enemy here and not allow them to advance even an inch. At that time, you may be able to suppress the enemy's charge with long-range shots. Yang Jie, Mao Fusho, each of you will lead 1,000 men and cooperate with Xiao Feng's company of 100 men. When you see Walla's vanguard cavalry enter Willow Gully, you will immediately close the gap. This will restrict a portion of the enemy's forces and reduce the pressure on our allies. At the same time, you must prevent the enemy from breaking out from here. Sun Tong, take 1,000 men and cooperate with 4th Company Commander Wu Shang. Wait for Walla's main force, which is that child Borromeo's troops, to send reinforcements to Nigel. No matter how fierce the attack is, you must not take a step back. When Xiao Feng, Yang Jie, and Mao Fusho stabilize the situation, they will come to support you. No need, we can handle it. Wu Shang stepped forward confidently. He looked as if he could complete his mission and didn't need anyone's help. It's good to be confident, but don't feel too much pressure. Also, when you can't hold on any longer, there will be orders for you. At that time, you can retreat to the side and open up a path for that child, Borromeo. Let him enter Willow Gully and become a turtle in a jar just like grandfather. Yang Chendong was very satisfied with Wu Shang's performance. As a soldier, one must have the spirit of fighting for the sake of thousands of people. Otherwise, one wouldn't be an outstanding soldier. After patting Wu Shang's shoulder and having him back down, Yang Chendong's gaze fell on Lung Song and Yang Guang, who hadn't been named yet. Your mission is to restrict Walla's leader, Yeshen. No matter what, you can't let them advance too smoothly. Yeshen is a very cunning and suspicious person. As long as he senses danger, he naturally won't recklessly advance. Once the time is right, I'll give the order. All you need to do is lead the army and charge over. When that time comes, you'll have done a great service. Yes, Lung Song and Yang Guang confidently replied. They had absolute faith in Yang Chendong. Since this was his order, it naturally couldn't be wrong. Okay, the order has been given. Is there anyone else who doesn't understand? If there isn't, immediately return to the armory and get a strong bow. Remember, other than cavalry, don't even think about engaging in close combat with the enemy. Just attack from afar. After assigning all the tasks, Yang Chendong calmly waved his hand. Although his blood was boiling at this moment, as a commander, he still needed to maintain his cool. This sort of performance would play a vital role in calming the soldiers. With this order, the army immediately began to get busy. What should have been a peaceful night in the capital was now bustling with activity. The army needed to prepare for battle and leave the city. Such an important matter had to be reported to the emperor and approved. Yang Chendong gave this task to Sun Tong. Marquis Yang, this general really didn't do it on purpose. When eunuch Jean sent someone to find me, I truly had no other choice. Sun Tong saw that Yang Chendong had given him this task and hurriedly tried to explain. He did not want to offend Yang Chendong because of this, as this would only bring him benefits. It's fine. Marquis knows of your difficulties and can understand. There's no need to think too much about it. Yang Chendong had a smile on his face, but it was just a formal smile. No one knew what he was thinking behind this smile. No, Marquis Yang, this general truly admires you. I have already regretted what I did before. This time, please send someone else. Sun Tong kept shaking his head, as if he wanted to express his determination. Yang Chendong stepped forward and placed a hand on Sun Tong's shoulder as he chuckled. Okay, Marquis understands your intentions. How about this? You still need to report. This time, it is Marquis who has asked you to go. It will be different from last time. This smile was much more sincere than before, and Sun Tong immediately nodded in understanding. Although one did not have a very high position in the Five Cities Warden's office, one still needed to be smooth and slick in dealing with people, and one also needed to be smart. Satisfied, Sun Tong left and headed straight for the Imperial Palace. Not long after, Jianing heard the news and met with Sun Tong. She heard about Yang Chendong's plans and determination for this battle. Is the main force of Walla's army coming? Commander Sun, what do you think are our chances of winning this time? Jianing did not know much about the battlefield. He did not even know where Willowtown was. However, he was better than Wang Zhan in that he would not casually interfere in things he did not know. For example, when it came to military matters, he did not understand, so he would ask for the opinions of others. I am not very sure either, but looking at the Marquis of Loyalty, he should be very confident. At this moment, we should choose to believe in him. Sun Tong did not dare to directly express his admiration for Yang Chendong, so he changed the way he spoke. Yes, we should believe in him. How about this? I will immediately report this matter to the Emperor. You wait for the tiger tally. Jianing nodded and told Sun Tong to wait where he was. He then went to the back of the palace to find the Emperor. It had to be said that Zhu Qiyu was very diligent. He had not yet slept and was still reading some books that the Emperor must read. When Jianing went forward and said that Yang Chendong was going to lead the army out of the city to fight Walla, his expression became somewhat nervous. Has Walla's main force arrived so soon? I wonder if the Marquis of Loyalty has made preparations. Your Majesty, with the help of the mercenaries, I think there will be no problem. Commander Sun Tong of the Warden's Office of the Five Cities has come to ask for your opinion and ask for the Tiger Tally to lead the army out of the city. Your Majesty, what do you think? Jianing asked carefully. The political power of the Ming dynasty was actually composed of civil and military officials, eunuchs, and the embroidered uniform guards. According to the rules of the past, when the army went out to war, there must be an accompanying eunuch to supervise the army. Only then would the emperor be at ease. However, this obviously did not work for Yang Chendong. Last time, he had refused to accompany the emperor, and the emperor had also agreed. If they were to send an eunuch this time, would the other party think too much? However, if there were no eunuchs accompanying him, if he handed over the tiger tally so easily, the emperor would not even have the strength to fight back once he had other thoughts. What are you looking at? Since the Marquis of Loyalty is going to deal with Walla's army, just give him the tiger tally. Don't worry, Yang Chendong is the youngest son of Lord Yang Rong. He won't do anything to me. Zhu Qiyu clearly saw Jianing's worry. However, he had his own plans. In his opinion, Yang Chendong was a little unique in his way of doing things, but he should not have any thoughts about the throne. Otherwise, when he saved Yingzong, he could have held the emperor hostage and ordered his vassals. However, he did not do so. Now, he would not do something like rebelling. Since the emperor had said so, Jianing could only nod and agree. However, for safety's sake, he still said, Your Majesty, why don't I personally go and see how the Marquis of Loyalty is preparing? Is there anything I can help with? That's good. Then you can go. Zhu Qiyu thought that sending Jianing was a form of attaching importance to him, so he nodded and agreed. Following Sun Tong, Jianing arrived at the courtyard where the mercenaries were stationed. When he saw Lung Song here, he merely nodded as a greeting. This was what the two of them had discussed before. In front of Yang Chendong, they would try their best to pretend that they were not familiar with each other to confuse him. How could he know that this was just Yang Chendong's idea? He wanted to give Jianing hope and let him feel that he had a chance. This way, the mercenaries and himself would be safe, and they would be able to reap more benefits. Marquis of Loyalty, is the army going to fight Walla? After entering the meeting room, Jianing asked knowingly. That's right. It has already been arranged. We're just waiting for your Majesty's tiger tally. Yang Chendong nodded and directly asked for the tiger tally. He had no intention of explaining the battle plan to Jianing. Chapter 206. It was one thing for Yang Chendong to not have eunuchs as supervisors when he led troops into battle, but he couldn't even be bothered to explain the battle plan. This made Jin Ying's expression turn ugly. Duke of Loyalty, how are we going to deal with the Walla this time? Do you have a chance of winning? Jin Ying kept asking for the battle plan. Although it was no longer a secret, Jin Ying had the right to know. If he knew, it was the same as the emperor knowing. But Yang Chendong couldn't be bothered to waste words with him. He still remembered that before he returned, it was this man who had ordered the brocade guards to attack Yangjia village. Yang Chendong didn't settle the score with him because he cared about the big picture. But it didn't mean that he would still speak nicely with him. Thus, in front of Yang Guang, Sun Tong, and the others, he turned around and said, "This marquis has spoken for an entire night, and my mouth is already dry. If Eunuch Jin wants to know the specific situation, you can ask someone else." Yang Guang, Sun Tong, and the others' expressions changed when they saw him reject Jin Ying in front of everyone. This was the head eunuch of the ceremony directorate, the favorite of the emperor. Wasn't Yang Chendong afraid that Jin Ying would hold a grudge against him and settle the score later? Tao Jin and the others couldn't help but lower their heads, indicating that they wanted to draw a clear line with Yang Chendong. Yang Guang stood unmoving. Sun Tong looked conflicted and hesitant. But in the end, he raised his head and looked at Jin Ying's deflated expression. Yang Chendong took in everyone's expressions out of the corner of his eye. Then, his gaze landed on Jin Ying. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. His smile was playful. At this moment, Jin Ying was furious. Ever since Zhu Qiyu had come to power, no one had dared to speak to him like this. Even the current emperor would talk to him in a negotiating tone when he encountered something. However, Yang Chendong actually dared to openly oppose him. This was simply challenging his authority. Jin Ying was furious, but on the surface, she did not show any signs of anger. Instead, she laughed and said, "Fine. Since the emperor has handed over military power to the Marquis of Loyalty, there should not be any problems. In that case, this duke will congratulate the army in advance on their triumphant return. This is the tiger tally. This duke still has to go back and report to His Majesty, so I won't stay any longer. Farewell." After saying that, Jin Ying turned around and left. No matter how one looked at it, her footsteps were somewhat unsteady. It was clear that she was extremely angry. But at the same time, he still had a backup plan in his heart, which was that he did not know the details of the battle plan. If they lost the battle, it would have nothing to do with him. At that time, he could use this as an excuse to punish Yang Chendong. What Jin Ying didn't know was that Yang Chendong would give her this opportunity. Because of Yang Chendong's attitude towards Jin Ying, the atmosphere in the meeting room was extremely tense. Yang Chendong acted as if he didn't see it and said, "All right, go do whatever you need to do. The tiger tally has already arrived. The army will set off in an hour." Yang Guang, Sun Tong, and the others quickly left. They needed to collect their weapons. It would take some time to gather their men. Lung Song and the others all stayed behind. Each of them only brought a company of soldiers, so they could be called to battle at any time. Without any outsiders, everyone's spirits were much more relaxed. Lung Song also carefully came to Yang Chendong's side and said, "Young master, Jin Ying is quite angry with you, but I don't know why she did this. Didn't you say that the group of eunuchs could always influence the great Ming emperor's thoughts?" This was not only Long Song's confusion, but also everyone's confusion. Even Tiger's Mane, who had been by Yang Chendong's side all this time, had a puzzled expression. These days, the sixth young master had been polite to everyone. Why did he suddenly turn hostile tonight? Seeing everyone's confusion, Yang Chendong laughed loudly and said, "You don't have to worry about the young master's safety. With you all here, who would dare to touch this young master? As for tonight's actions, they were originally intentional. I wanted to show my dislike for Jin Ying and let the world know that this young master doesn't like the group of eunuchs." "Why is that?" everyone asked again in confusion. The people's hearts. Yang Chendong pondered for a moment and didn't answer immediately. Instead, he paused for a moment before spitting out these two words. Ever since the defeat of the Timu fortress, everyone knew that the eunuchs had ruined the great Ming dynasty's plans. They had caused so many soldiers to die tragically on the battlefield, and so many officials to die without even leaving behind their corpses. This caused the common people and some officials to hate the eunuchs to the bone. Yang Chendong didn't give Jining any face and did it in front of so many people. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before this matter spread out. Even if these people didn't say anything, they would use the security bureau to spread the news. In this way, everyone would know that the loyal Marquis wasn't afraid of the eunuchs. This was tantamount to giving everyone a glimmer of hope. Letting those people who hated the eunuchs to the bone find a leader would allow him to win the hearts of the army and the people in a very short period of time. These might not be of much use in the political struggles of the upper echelons, but once it was time to explode, it would definitely be a force that couldn't be underestimated. Yang Chendong's goal was to replace the great Ming dynasty peacefully. The hearts of the army and the people were the most important issues to be resolved. As for the officials and eunuchs, as long as they were given enough benefits, they wouldn't be a problem. This was the true reason why Yang Chendong didn't give Jining any face. In the end, he was setting up a trap. It was just that he had set it up too early, so others couldn't see its effects. He only mentioned the people's hearts and didn't give any further explanation. Yang Chendong looked at Long Song and the others and said, "This battle concerns the safety of the great Ming dynasty's capital and the image of this young master. Do you have the confidence to win this battle?" "Yes." Long Song and the others stood at attention, their faces full of confidence as they replied, "Very good. Since that's the case, you can go and make your preparations. Long Song, stay behind." Yang Chendong waved his hand at everyone. Xiaofeng, Tengshan, Wu Sheng, and the others quickly left to mobilize the people before the battle. Long Song, who was left behind, looked at his young master expectantly. "Let's go. The two of us will leave the city first. There are some things that need to be arranged in advance." Looking at Long Song, Yang Chendong smiled confidently. He wouldn't tell others that he had a large warehouse. He could take out many heavy weapons at any time. Thus, he left Long Song alone to make arrangements for this matter. The old man had an impatient personality. Ever since he received the order from Yeshin, he had been rushing toward the great Ming dynasty's capital without stopping. In just one day, he had arrived at Willow Town, which was 30 li away from the capital. "General, we've been hurrying along the way. Both men and horses are tired. Should we rest here for the night first? When the sun rises tomorrow morning, we'll go straight to the great Ming dynasty's capital." A trusted aide looked at the lit villages and towns in front of him and suggested. The grandfather shook his head and arrogantly said, "There's no need. Let's rest in the town first, and then we'll launch a night assault on the capital. We'll catch the enemy by surprise." Ha ha ha, the merit will definitely go to this general. Since he had taken the role of the vanguard, he naturally had to make achievements. Otherwise, wouldn't he be ridiculed by others? As for the success rate of the night attack on the great Ming dynasty's capital, he didn't consider it at all. In the Battle of the Timu Fortress, what he saw was the scene of the defeated army of the great Ming dynasty being killed and captured in groups. At this moment, he didn't put the strength of the great Ming dynasty's army in his eyes at all. In order to reach the great Ming dynasty's capital as soon as possible, the old man entered Willow Town as Yang Chendong expected. If it were other generals, in order to reduce unnecessary trouble, when they encountered an enemy town, they might be able to take a detour and not directly attack. But because of the Battle of Timu Fortress, the Walla cavalry had long been arrogant. They didn't even put the elite army of the great Ming dynasty in their eyes, so how could they take the ordinary people of a town seriously? On the contrary, when they entered the town, they could burn, kill, and loot. How exciting and satisfying was that? However, when they really entered Willow Town, the situation was beyond their expectations. Although every house in the whole village was lit, they couldn't see a single person. When they broke in, they didn't find the existence of a living person, not even a chicken, duck, or goose. When the old man who received the report of the battle heard that this was an uninhabited town, he sneered and said, "I didn't expect the great Ming dynasty to play the scorched earth game with us. It's just that their calculations are wrong. We didn't consume too much on the way here. Even if we can't replenish for a while, it doesn't matter. Humph. It's just that this method is really annoying. Come, inform everyone to eat some dry food here. After half an hour, the army will set off." General Naigong, didn't take the empty town in front of him seriously. This was a complete display of his arrogance. If it were any other general who was on guard, they would probably think carefully about why such a thing would happen. At least, they wouldn't rest so comfortably in this town. Of course, General Naigong was also a brave general who had led troops for many years. During the rest time, he didn't forget to send scouts to the front to inquire about information. But he didn't know that the scouts he sent out were destined to not return. They had completed their mission of going to the underworld to inquire about information. Naigong's army stopped in Willow Town and didn't leave. This gave Xiao Feng, Yang Jie, and Mao Fusho enough time to prepare. Seeing that the enemy had entered the encirclement, the 2,100 people quickly set up a defensive line on the west side of Willow Town. Each of them drew their bows and prepared to block the enemy's retreat. While Xiao Feng and the others were still preparing, at the east exit of Willow Town, Tang Shan had already begun his journey to harvest lives. Chapter 207. Xiao Feng, Tao Jin, Gao Li, and the other 2,100 soldiers were the first to enter the battlefield. With sufficient time, they even dug a simple trench for the soldiers to hide in. Just as they finished everything, the sky began to darken. Not long after, the sounds of people chattering could be heard in the distance. This was the sound of Walla's vanguard troops entering Willow Town. The enemy was right in front of them. In an instant, the 2,000 soldiers of the warden's office became very nervous. Some of the soldiers who were participating in a battle for the first time had their palms sweating profusely to express the anxiety in their hearts. This was how they should behave when they were on the battlefield for the first time. For some people, even if it was their second time on the battlefield, they would still be nervous. However, after 100 battles, they would no longer be nervous when they saw the battlefield. Instead, they would be excited. In contrast, the 100 soldiers led by Tang Shan were very calm. They first used sharp military shovels to dig a hole in the ground to ensure that they could hide their bodies well. Then, they set up the 95 style in their hands and aimed the crosshairs at the only exit from Willow Town that led to the capital. None of the 100 or so people spoke, nor did they make any extra noise. They gave off the feeling of ghosts in the night. Other than a faint shadow, nothing else could be seen. The lifelessness of the Long Feng soldiers shocked the surrounding 2,000 soldiers of the warden's office. Among them, there were some people who were quite skilled and thought that they were great. However, when they compared themselves, they realized that the gap between them and the soldiers was huge. Not long after the soldiers finished their preparations, 3 warhorses rushed out of the town and headed straight for the formation they had set up. From the looks of it, they were all lightly dressed. There was no doubt that they were scouts. Position 1, Position 2, Position 3, get ready to fire. Positions 4, 5, 6, and 6, prepare to fire at any time. Seeing the 3 enemy scouts charging towards his formation, Tang Shan Company commander, who was leading the formation, only took a glance before losing interest. There were only 3 people, and they were not even enough to fill the gaps between the teeth. He could just hand them over to 3 soldiers. The 3 people who were named immediately became excited. This was a kind of glory, but at the same time, it was also a kind of test. Didn't you see that Company Commander Tang Shan had arranged for other people to take the last shot at any time? If he really missed, he would lose face and the limelight would be stolen by others. If that happened, he wouldn't even be able to find a place to cry. The 3 soldiers closed their right eyes and aimed at the 3 moving targets with their left eyes. Their breathing gradually stabilized, and their right index fingers gently placed on the trigger, preparing for shooting. Fight! When he estimated that the 3 enemy scouts were only 150 steps away from him, Tang Shan softly spat out a word. Then, 3 gunshots were heard. Bang! 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 On the opposite side, 3 Walla scouts fell off their horses at the same time. When the 3 of them fell off their horses, the warriors in positions 4, 5, and 6 cursed at the same time. This had nothing to do with quality. It was all because they didn't have the chance to shoot. It was just another kind of complaint. Looking at the warriors in positions 1, 2, and 3, they were all in high spirits. They almost laughed out loud when they saw that they had hit the target. At the same time, The soldiers of the great Ming dynasty who were with them all widened their eyes in disbelief at this moment. The scene just now deeply stimulated them. They couldn't believe that a battle could be fought like this. From a distance of 150 steps in the dark, they could still accurately hit the enemy. What kind of method was this? Thinking about how they could fight side by side with such an army, the officials of the 5 cities' warden's office began to feel confident. Originally, they thought that it would be very difficult or even impossible to stop the enemy's cavalry of 10,000 with only 2,000 soldiers. As for the 100 mercenaries, they didn't take them seriously at all. What could such a small number of people do? However, when the truth was in front of them, they knew that they were wrong, very wrong. They were afraid that the combat power of these 100 mercenaries would not be much worse than the 2,000 of them. The 3 gunshots sounded so ear-piercing in the quiet night. Walla's army in Willow Town quickly moved. The general in charge of the town immediately shouted to his trusted aide, "It seems to be the sound of firearms. Go and see what happened." Although he suspected that it was the sound of firearms, the arrogant general still didn't think that the great Ming army would have the courage to come out of the city and fight with him. They had received intelligence that although many of the nearby great Ming dynasty guards were sending reinforcements to the capital, distant water couldn't quench the immediate thirst. There were only 10,000 soldiers in the capital, and most of them were second-rate soldiers. They were very easy to deal with. Such an army wouldn't have the courage to come out of the city and provoke him. However, thinking was one thing, and reality was another. Not long after the general sent people to patrol the situation, another round of gunshots sounded. Then, in the small courtyard where he was resting, a trusted aide ran over with a nervous expression. General, we found a large number of great Ming army outside the town. They used firearms and strong bows to kill dozens of our warriors." The trusted aide fell in front of the general and said in a panic, "What? Great Ming army?" When he heard that there were great Ming army here, Walla was stunned for a moment. Then, he laughed heartily. Very good, very good. This general thought that he would only start a massacre when he entered the capital. I didn't expect that he would deliver himself to my doorstep so quickly. Very good. Pass down the order. Warriors, get on your horses and charge with this general. It was just firearms and strong bows. The general really didn't put them in his eyes. Not to mention that accuracy was not good in the dark of the night. Even if it was daytime, he had 10,000 cavalry. Why would he fear the great Ming army? Whether it was firearms or strong bows, there was a limit to how far they could shoot. There was also a time difference when controlling them. With this, the Walla cavalry could charge forward. As long as they charged into the enemy's camp, it would be time for them to start a massacre and rampage on the battlefield. The general was very confident. Not only that, his Walla cavalry didn't take the great Ming army in front of them seriously. Along the way, they had seen too many useless great Ming soldiers. There was no one who could scare them. As expected of the elite cavalry, they quickly gathered together. However, because the road to the east of Willow Town was not wide, it was not suitable for a large number of cavalry to charge forward. Thus, the general personally picked 500 cavalry and let them be the vanguard of the vanguard to charge forward. No matter how much damage they suffered, they had to charge to the enemy's formation and create enough time for the rear troops to charge forward. The 500 cavalry obeyed the order and left. Like a gust of wind, they charged out of Willow Town and headed straight for the great Ming army camp. At this moment, Tangshan and the soldiers of the 3rd Company were looking forward with bright eyes. They were ready to fire at any time. Beside them, the 2,000 great Ming soldiers led by Tao Jin and Gao Li also pulled their bows and were ready to shoot at any time. After shooting down the first 3 Vol scouts, the enemy had launched another wave of attacks. More than 30 of them had been wiped out by the mercenaries from afar. Although the Ming army had released some arrows during this period of time, they all knew that it was just to scare people. None of the Watts cavalry had been killed by the arrows. After being robbed twice in a row, Tao Jin and the others also wanted to perform well this time. Thus, they gave the order early on. As long as the enemy cavalry entered the range of the shooting range, they did not need to wait for orders and could shoot arrows to kill the enemy. In the dark night, they were waiting with a net. At this moment, the air was filled with a kind of solidification factor, causing everyone's breathing to become heavier. The originally cold night was filled with a warm atmosphere. Within their sight, they could hear the sound of horse hooves coming from afar. Because there were too many cavalry, the ground was trembling because of it, causing every soldier's face to be filled with a dignified aura. They're coming out. In the hope and expectation, a large number of strong horses rushed out of Willow Town. There were also bursts of shouts and shouts. Those were the Walla warriors riding their horses. They wanted to rush forward at the fastest speed and kill the great Ming army. Prepare to shoot. The moment they saw the cavalry rush out of the town, Ting Shan, who was leading the team, gave the order to the soldiers of the 3rd Company. The distance of 500 steps was far beyond the effective range of the Type 95, which was 600 to 800 meters. If he gave the order to shoot now, it would be difficult for the bullets to hurt the enemy. However, this did not prevent him from giving the order to shoot. As long as the soldiers felt that they could kill the enemy, they could deal with it themselves. Every soldier carried a basic magazine, 300 bullets, to ensure that when fighting the Walla cavalry, the enemy would not be able to break through the defense line because of the lack of ammunition. Commander Tang Shan gave the order, and the momentum of the 100 soldiers of the Cold Vanguard suddenly changed. A powerful murderous aura spread out from their bodies. In the end, it formed a substantial cold air, causing the great Ming soldiers who were closer to them to feel a burst of coldness. Ayo, yo-ho! The Walla cavalry made a charging sound that belonged to their race. Under the command of their masters, the strong horses quickly closed the distance between the two sides. 350 steps, 300 steps, 250 steps. They had already reached the effective range of the Type 95, but the soldiers of the 3rd Company did not shoot. It was obvious that their usual training was effective. Due to the lack of raw materials such as copper and iron in the arsenal of Crimson City, when the instructor taught the Cold Vanguard soldiers, the most common sentence was to save ammunition and try to shoot every bullet into the enemy's chest instead of shooting randomly. Chapter 208. Even though Lung Feng had brought enough ammo this time, he didn't want to waste any bullets. He gripped his gun tightly and stared ahead like an eagle, thinking about the best time to fire. 230 steps, 220 steps, 200 steps. When they reached 200 paces, which was the effective distance of 300 meters, the sound of gunfire suddenly became louder. In the dark night, it was as if a meteor shower had streaked across the sky, directly pouring down on the bodies of the Walla cavalry that was surging forward. Under the dazzling light of the fire, the Walla cavalry, who seemed to have seen hope, experienced what it meant to be in hell, and experienced what it meant to have nothing to live for, to have no hope in life. When the powerful bullets spun out of the barrel and drilled into their bodies in less than half a breath, many of the Walla cavalry were killed on their horses before they could even understand what was happening. Perhaps because the charging speed was too fast, many of the cavalrymen were already dead, but their bodies were still charging forward. Only after 2 or 3 breaths did they fall off their horses with a plop. Even when they died, they probably didn't understand what had killed them. The 100 Cold Vanguard soldiers followed what they had learned in their training, firing in a staggered formation. It was as if they had set up a net of fire, wiping out all of the Walla cavalry within the range of 200 to 150 steps. In short, other than the war horses, none of the Walla cavalry could get within 150 steps. This distance of 150 steps became an insurmountable barrier in front of the Walla cavalry. Behind the 100 Walla cavalry were Tao Jin and Gao Li's 2 soldiers from the 5 cities warden's office. Originally, they thought that this would be a tragic battle, and some of the soldiers were already prepared to die for a righteous cause. But when they saw the Walla cavalry's sudden burst of power and the situation stabilized, they knew that this was not a battle, but a massacre. That's right, a massacre. Not a single one of the cavalrymen was able to get within 150 paces. At such a distance, even if they wanted to shoot arrows, they wouldn't be able to reach the effective range and wouldn't be able to do any damage. The Walla cavalry's crossbows could not shoot over, and the 2,000 soldiers of the Great Ming dynasty could not shoot either. This scene caused Tao Jin and Gao Li's hearts to burn with anxiety. They were here to gain merit, not to be spectators. They wanted to kill the enemy, but the distance that a strong bow could shoot was limited. Even if they shot from such a long distance, they would still lose their accuracy. There was no difference between shooting and not shooting. Commanders, if you really don't have anything else to do, just bring some people to bring back Wale's healthy horses. These are all good things. Whether it's offered to the imperial court or sold to merchants, they are all military merits and silver. Tang Shan noticed the anxious mood of the two great Ming dynasty commanders behind him, so he gave them a suggestion. The strong horses were in front. Without their owners, more and more of them gathered and began to hinder the Wala cavalry's shooting targets. If these strong horses could be moved away, it could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. Tao Jin and Gao Li, who were originally worried that they had nothing to do, immediately smiled. Okay, we will immediately organize people to steal the horses. Oh no, it's to pick up the horses, since there was military merit and money to be obtained, and there was not much danger to their lives, why wouldn't they do such a good thing? At this moment, under the command of the two commanders, groups of great Ming soldiers rushed forward under the moonlight and brought the tall and strong horses back to their camp. They also cleared the obstacles in front of the Wala cavalry to ensure that they could have a clear line of sight. At the same time, there were no obstacles after the bullets were shot, so they could better kill the Wala cavalry. In Willow Town, 1,000 Wala cavalry were sent out, but not a single one returned. Another 1,000 Wala cavalry rushed out, but only less than 200 people escaped. The results that were sent back made General Naigong turn pale with fright. He couldn't understand when the firearms of the great Ming dynasty became so powerful that they could also play a role in sealing off the night. It was not that they had never dealt with the firearms of the great Ming dynasty before. In the past, when Zhu Di was still alive, he took them to the grasslands to commit crimes. In the beginning, they were indeed intimidated by the firearms that could emit smoke and shoot iron bullets. But after many bloody battles, they also found out the shortcomings of the firearms. That was, they could only shoot one shot at a time. After that, it would take a long time to reload. When it was used again, the accuracy was extremely poor. It was far better to use a strong bow. Over time, such things no longer scared the Wala people. Only they dared to risk their lives and sacrifice themselves. They could break through the firearms of the great Ming dynasty by paying a small price. After that, they could do whatever they wanted. How could it be like this time? 2 echelons of 2,000 people rushed out, but only 1/10 of them returned. What the hell is going on? Who can give me an explanation? Seeing that they had lost nearly 1/5 of their forces without killing a single enemy, General Naigong angrily roared at his subordinates. All the Wala generals lowered their originally arrogant heads deeply. They also couldn't figure out what was going on. They couldn't understand why the great Ming army, which was originally weak, became so powerful that they suffered such a big loss. No one answered his question. General Naigong's emotions couldn't be vented. He was even angrier. Just as he was about to use the saddle to teach these disappointing subordinates a lesson, suddenly, a burst of gunshots came from the west side of Willow Town. It was like many firecrackers were set off. What's going on? The sudden sound scared General Naigong. He looked at the burst of fire coming from the west side of the town and asked angrily. Just as the words left his mouth, a young general quickly ran in front of General Naigong and knelt on the ground. General, a large number of great Ming soldiers suddenly rushed in behind us. We were careless for a moment, and more than 500 people were killed or injured. This was a Wala Chiliarch who was in charge of covering the rear. Usually, his task was the simplest and safest. He was only responsible for checking if there were any soldiers who escaped because of the battle. But today, they were suddenly attacked. They were completely unprepared and were caught off guard. Half of the soldiers died on the spot. The rest reacted faster and escaped into the town. General Naigong was in a fit of anger. When he heard the Kiliarcha's words, he stretched out his right hand and grabbed the Kiliarcha's collar and pulled it in front of his face. What did you say? The great Ming army attacked us from behind? How many people are there? I can't see clearly. It's too dark. The Chiliarch shook his head with an innocent expression. He couldn't be blamed for answering like this. It was really too dark. In addition, he was unprepared. When the gunshots rang out, a large number of his brothers fell to the ground. He only cared about running for his life. How could he have the time to see how many enemies were there? The Kiliarch's answer made General Nigong throw him to the ground angrily. Then, he shouted to the other troops, "Who dares to lead the troops to the back and see what happened?" General Nigong in Willowtown was stunned. He originally thought that he was the one who took the initiative to attack, but reality told him that the great Ming army was prepared. Now that he was the one who was attacked, how could he not be angry? Among the young generals, there was a brave Chiliarch who took the initiative to lead his troops to the west side of Willowtown. But when cold weapons faced the 9.5 spear that had a shooting range of nearly 400 steps, the result was obvious. After leaving behind a few hundred corpses, the slow ones all retreated. At this point, an unbelievable result was placed in front of everyone. General Nigong's troops were surrounded in Willowtown, which was not very big. East side of town. Tung Shan looked at the gunshots and flames coming from the west side of town. He was furious. Xiaofeng, King bastard. It was no wonder that Tung Shan was so angry. According to the previous plan, only when they were facing the crazy attacks of the Walla cavalry would they send out a red signal to the sky. At that time, Xiaofeng's first company would poke the Walla cavalry from the back to distract them. At the same time, they would also reduce the pressure on their side. But now, Xiaofeng did not even wait for his signal. He directly poked the Walla vanguard from the back. How could Tung Shan not be angry? He was not satisfied with the fight yet. But the reality was already like this. Even if he was angry, there was nothing he could do. Tung Shan could only look at the east side of Willowtown, hoping that there would be more Walla cavalry who were not afraid of death. Maybe it was because the heavens knew the hope in his heart. A large number of cavalry rushed out from the east side of town, and there were still many of them. Using the shadows under the moonlight, a rough calculation showed that there were at least more Walla cavalry than the last time. Haha, very good. This grandfather is to my liking. He knows what the battalion commander likes and wants to die. Brothers of the 3rd Company, listen up. Check your guns and ammo. Make preparations before shooting. Seeing that the enemy did not show any intention of retreating because of Xiaofeng's actions, Tung Shan changed his frowning expression and laughed out loud. The 3rd Company's Cold Vanguard members were originally angry because Xiaofeng's 1st Company didn't keep their promise. However, when they suddenly saw that the enemy still charged out, all of their faces lit up with joy. They quickly checked the 95 shots and replaced it with a new magazine. Why did the Walla army still rush out when they knew that the Ming army was blocking them from the east side? This had a lot to do with their commander, General Nigong. Knowing that they were surrounded, General Nigong was not afraid. He knew that the Ming army only had about 10,000 people. He originally thought that they were waiting for him at the east side. If he wanted to rush over, it would be difficult. But the Ming army actually took the initiative to split into two. Wasn't this the same as splitting their limited forces? Even so, how many enemies could there be in the front? If he did not rush now, when would he? When he broke through the front line, wouldn't the capital of the great Ming dynasty be an undefended empty city? Wouldn't he be able to take it? Chapter 209. Nigong thought that he had seen through the weakness of the Ming army. Thus, he gathered 3,000 cavalrymen and had them charge out from the front. 3,000 Walla cavalrymen surged forward. From afar, they looked intimidating. At the very least, the Ming army led by Tao Jin and Gao Li trembled in fear. However, Tung Shan, who did not care about all this, had the opposite expression. His eyes were wide open as he looked forward. He waited for the enemy to enter the predetermined distance before he started shooting. Without needing anyone to give the order, all the Long Feng soldiers started firing when they estimated that the enemy cavalry had entered their effective shooting range. Similarly, a dense net of fire enveloped the front. The Cold Vanguard soldiers guarding the center even switched their guns to burst mode. Often, a small group of cavalry would fall to the ground together with their horses after a burst of bullets. Naturally, this method of fighting could not kill one person with one shot. However, it had an absolute deterrent effect and disrupted the charging formation of the enemy cavalry. Under the dense gunfire, at least 1,000 Walla cavalrymen were killed in the charging path. However, this also bought them a distance of more than 100 steps. Just as they were getting closer and closer to the Long Feng soldiers and were less than 40 steps away, Grenades rained down on them like rain. Then, a series of deafening sounds rang out. Following that, people shouted and horses neighed nonstop. A series of powerful grenades were thrown and completely shattered the enemy's fighting spirit. At the same time, countless people died. Those who were still alive immediately retreated. They no longer had the courage to charge. Phew! Tao Jin and Gao Li let out a long sigh. It had to be said that their performance just now was a little too weak. When they saw the enemy rushing in front of them, they actually forgot that they were still holding strong bows in their hands and could only watch helplessly as the enemy got closer and closer. Their legs began to go soft and their bodies began to tremble. It could be imagined that if the Langfeng soldiers were not the main force in this battle, these 2,000 Ming soldiers would have been defeated. If they were not captured, they would have been killed. It could be said that these Ming soldiers had not received proper training for too long. They had forgotten what the battlefield was like. They had forgotten that a life and death battle relied on courage. Fortunately, the Langfeng made a move at the crucial moment. He used the powerful grenades to destroy the enemy's morale and won another victory. Another attack had failed. The old man in the town was not discouraged. Instead, he patted his head as if he had suddenly realized something. Aya, it's all my fault. It turns out that the Ming army's main force is right in front. It seems like their weak point is behind us. Come on, gather the rest of the troops and charge out with me. After knowing that it was impossible to attack from the front, Naigong immediately changed his strategy and decided to leave the town from the west. He thought that he was very adaptable, but in fact, he was just adding fuel to the fire. However, as the person in the game, Naigong had no idea. With the order, the remaining 6,000 Walla cavalrymen quickly gathered. However, because the path out of the city was not wide enough, only 1,000 cavalrymen could charge out at a time. As the leading general, Naigong took the initiative to stand in the third echelon, which was the third group to charge out. In Naigong's eyes, standing here was undoubtedly very safe. Once the first two factions had used up all their firearms, it would be time for him to go on a killing spree and show off his might. However, would that really be the case? Xiao Feng, along with Yang Jie and Mao Fushou's 2,000 Ming soldiers, was destined to teach Naigong a lesson. Everyone, be careful. In a moment, the Walla cavalry might charge out from the west. At that time, we will attack when they are 300 steps away. Before that, I hope that Commander Yang and Commander Mao can play your roles. Lie in ambush on the two sides and shoot from afar. Don't worry about whether you can hit the enemy or not. Just shoot with the fastest speed and immediately retreat. Do you understand? Xiao Feng looked at the two commanders of the Ming army and used an unquestionable tone to give the order. Although they were not affiliated with each other, Yang Jie and Mao Fushou had seen how Xiao Feng had led the Cold Front Company into Willowtown and killed hundreds of Walla cavalry. In the army, the strong were always respected. With the scene just now, Xiao Feng's words naturally had more credibility. Furthermore, he was not asking them to go up and die. Why would they not agree? At that moment, the two of them expressed their agreement and quickly began to make preparations. They had made arrangements in advance. Just as the 2,000 Ming army went to the west of Willowtown, a large number of Walla army appeared. Release the arrows, release the arrows. After releasing the arrows, immediately retreat. When Yang Jie and Mao Fushou saw that the Walla cavalry had charged into the range of the bows, they loudly gave the order. Immediately, arrows rained down from the sky and landed on the Walla cavalry that was charging out of the town. The dense barrage of arrows rained down, and hundreds of Walla cavalry were shot down. They fell from their horses, causing waves of chaos. However, even more cavalry charged out and headed straight for Xiao Feng, who was guarding the front. Attack! Xiao Feng, who was also holding the 95 style, had an excited expression on his face. He was the first to raise his gun and shoot, hitting a Walla cavalry that was charging over with a sword. This was like a signal that instantly pulled the attention of all the Cold Front Company soldiers. At that moment, hundreds of guns were fired at the same time. Bullets flew out from the muzzles and flew towards the charging enemy and the warhorses that were relatively larger in size. Ha ha ha! Do you see? The Ming army here is indeed few in number. Follow me and charge. When he saw that the bows were flying all over the sky, but in reality, they were not very accurate and their accuracy was greatly reduced. The leading Wei Gong thought that he had seen through the Ming army. He was immediately overjoyed and urged the army to quickly move forward. Just as the order was given, the second echelon of 1,000 Walla cavalry charged out, and there was a burst of firecrackers in front of them. From afar, they could not see the situation in front of them clearly. They could only see streaks of fire that were like meteors flashing by. It was because they could not see the situation in front of them that the Walla cavalry at the back continued to charge forward, one after another, towards hell. The sound of the gunshots traveled very far. Around 15 li behind Wei Gong, they could faintly see the scene of red light flashing in the distance. Luckily, this was a plain. If there was a forest in the way, it would be difficult to see the scene in the distance. The Ming army actually came out of the city to fight? Looking at the red sky in front of him, Borromeo quickly made a judgment and guessed that Wei Gong had encountered the Ming army. Based on the time that they set off, he did not think that Wei Gong would be able to reach the capital so quickly. Thus, there could only be one conclusion, and that was that the Ming army took the initiative to come out of the city. They wanted to catch them off guard. In the art of war, there was the saying of taking the enemy by surprise. However, the Walla were mostly cavalry. In a battle on a plain, their advantage was too great. The Ming army did not know this, so it was no wonder that they were defeated. Men, send down the order to speed up and gather with Wei Gong's troops as soon as possible. In order to not let Wei Gong take all the credit, Borromeo, who had always been cautious, was careless for once. This was naturally because the sky was dark, so no one could see what was happening in front of them. However, it was also because of Ing Zong and Shi Heng's repeated defeats, which caused the Walla to be arrogant and think that the Ming army could not withstand a single blow. Under the order, the 20,000 Walla cavalry increased their speed. In a few moments, they had traveled 10 li. When they reached here, they could faintly hear the dense gunshots in front of them. They're here, they're here. When Battalion Commander Wu Sheng and his 4 company brothers saw the Walla cavalry approaching from afar, they immediately became excited. Previously, they were worried that the Walla's main force would shrink back because of the unclear situation in front of them. Now, it seemed that there was no need to worry. The excitement of Wu Sheng and Long Feng was seen by Sun Tong and Ming Jun, who were accompanying them. They were very confused. They couldn't understand. At most, there were only 1,100 people. How could they be so excited and happy when facing 20,000 enemies? Did these people not want to live anymore? Or were they too arrogant and did not put others in their eyes? Under the astonished gazes, Wu Sheng and Long Feng quickly checked the black firearms in their hands. Then, they formed a small semicircle and crawled on both sides of the road to Willow Town. 100 against 20,000, Wu Sheng would not be so arrogant as to fight hand-to-hand with the enemy. They adopted the battle strategy that Yang Qindong taught them. That strategy was to retreat when the enemy advanced, harass when the enemy was stationary, attack when the enemy was tired, and advance when the enemy retreated. In the process of the Walla army's advance, they would give the enemy the most effective damage. At the same time, the enemy would be annoyed and unable to do anything to them. The soldiers of 4th Company were divided into 3 groups by platoon. The first platoon was personally led by Wu Sheng. There were a total of 4 platoons, and they were also the strongest. They were responsible for blocking the Walla cavalry's advance. The second platoon was on the left, and the third platoon was on the right. They were responsible for blocking the advance of the Walla cavalry. Wu Sheng had just given the 3 platoon leaders their tasks when Sun Tong hurriedly walked over. Company Commander Wu, what can we do? You are responsible for following my platoon. Retreat as you fight on the road. Create a false impression that we are no match for the Walla cavalry. This will make them bolder and chase after us. That will be a great achievement. Wu Sheng roughly explained the battle plan that he and young Master Yang Qindong had arranged. When Sun Chuanchu heard this military order, he was stunned at first. Then, he understood what it meant and said, Company Commander Wu means that we should pretend to run away? Yes, something like that. Why? Is there a problem, Commander Sun? Wu Sheng thought that this understanding was not wrong. However, one kind of defeat was intentional, and the other was genuine. He just did not know how the 1,000 Ming soldiers would perform. Chapter 210. No, no problem. Hearing that they were just pretending to run away, Sun Tong nodded firmly. If he had to lead 1,000 soldiers to fight against the 20,000 elite Walla cavalry, it would be impossible. But when it came to running away, there was no need to disguise anything. Everyone knew what to do, right? In fact, it was exactly so. When the 20,000 Walla cavalrymen appeared and displayed their majestic and powerful side, the 1,000 Ming soldiers actually displayed their inability to run away vividly and vividly. Before Wu Shang and Sun Tong even gave any orders, the 1,000 Ming soldiers began to collapse. This was not an act, but a genuine fear in their hearts. In the end, what they showed was exactly what Wu Shang had predicted. It was even more realistic than what he had imagined. And for such an outcome to occur, it didn't seem to be as simple as acting. Instead, he really did run away because he was afraid. The Ming soldiers in front of them were defeated before they even made contact. When the Walla cavalry saw this scene, they burst into laughter. Then, they charged forward without any fear. It looked like they wanted to beat the enemy when they were down. The Walla cavalry, who wanted to fight for glory, rushed out with more than 1,000 men. This was exactly what Wu Sheng wanted. He was only leading a company and had limited military strength. In this situation, if the enemy had too many soldiers, he could only retreat in order to ensure that he did not suffer any casualties. But if the enemy only had 1,000 men, he was confident that he could defeat them. Use flag signals to give orders to the second and third platoons. Let them fight according to the previous plan. The first row of warriors will wait for the enemy cavalry to enter our shooting range. Let's kill them. There's no need to hold back. Wu Sheng looked at the dust on the road opposite him and saw more and more enemy cavalry approaching him. He then gave the order to the cold vanguard soldiers. They could not wait, especially when they heard the gunfire behind them. The morale of the cold vanguard soldiers was high. They finally had a chance to perform well in front of the 6th young master. Of course, they did not want to miss this opportunity. As time passed, Wu Sheng's 4th company, brimming with battle intent, finally came into close contact with Walla's 1,000 cavalrymen. When the distance between the two sides was less than 200 steps, and those with good eyesight could even see the shadows of the other side, Wu Sheng decisively gave the order to open fire. For a moment, the 40-man team of cold vanguards spat out tongues of flame from their firearms. At this time, there was no need to aim at all. He only needed to rely on his intuition to shoot at the black shadow in the distance. As the gunshots continued to ring out, sparks streaked across the sky like meteors. One by one, the cavalrymen fell from their horses. Many of them did not understand what had happened even until they died. 80 to 90% of the Walla cavalry in the first 3 rows were wiped out, which allowed the Walla cavalry behind to see the situation in front of them clearly. When a Walla Chiliarch saw that they had lost 20 to 30% of their troops, his eyes widened in anger and he shouted angrily, "Everyone, don't be afraid. This is the Ming army's firearms camp. As long as we can charge in, it's time to show off. Kill." After 200 to 300 of their men were killed, the Vara cavalry did not retreat. Instead, they charged forward, shouting their unique Mongolian language and chant. It was clear that they wanted to use the advantage of the speed of their horses to charge into the Ming army. Then, they would start a massacre. The Walla cavalry was very fast and charged forward like a whirlwind. In the dark night, it gave people the feeling that dark clouds were pressing down on the city. If they were facing the Ming army this time, even if the Ming army was several times more powerful than them, they would still have a chance of winning. They would even be able to beat the Ming army until they covered their heads and ran away. Unfortunately, they were facing the Yang Xie's new cold vanguard army, which was 100 times more powerful than them. Facing an enemy that was dozens of times more powerful than them, they were not afraid at all. Instead, they were excited. Raising the 95 style in his hand, Commander Wu Sheng shouted, "Attack!" Not only on the official road, but on both sides of the official road, tongues of fire also sprayed out, completely surrounding the Watts cavalry from afar in a fan-shaped formation. Bang, bang, bang. Under the sounds of gunfire, the pitiful Walla cavalry were like paddy fields swept by a hurricane. Plop, 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 they fell to the ground one by one. From afar, The sounds of men and horses being overturned could be heard. The cold vanguard never knew what it meant to be soft when facing enemies. They may have a soft side, but that side was only for their family and friends, as well as the young master Yang Chendong that they were loyal to. As for other people, they were no different from animals. Hundreds of tongues of fire were fired, and only 1,000 Walla cavalry corpses were left on the official road. This vanguard army finally paid with their lives for their arrogance. When the child General Borromeo arrived with a large group of men, all he saw was a ground full of corpses and the stench of blood in the air. Report: the Ming army is retreating. There are about 1,000 of them, and they are less than 5 miles away from us. The elite Walla army scouts quickly determined the situation of the Ming army from the traces on the ground and reported it to General Borromeo. When he heard that 1,000 of his elite warriors were killed by 1,000 Ming soldiers, Borromeo's eyes flashed with intense anger. He had a vicious side to him, and people like him were the most vengeful. Since someone had slapped him, if he did not catch the culprit and punish him 100 or 1,000 times, he would not let it go. Order the army to advance. We must catch up to the Ming army, and then kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. In his anger, Borromeo gave out the order to kill. When the Qin who under him heard this, they immediately got on their horses and galloped forward. The Walla cavalry was determined to kill the Ming army that was 5 miles away. It was as if a vicious wolf had set its eyes on a sheep, opening its bloody mouth. However, it seemed that their teeth were not sharp. Facing the retreating Cold Front 4th Company, not only did they not manage to swallow their prey as they had expected, they even broke a few teeth along the way. It was a great loss. After a few charges, they were beaten back a few times. After losing another 1,000 cavalry, the Walla cavalry had advanced more than 10 miles and was now 5 miles away from Willow Town. At this time, Wu Sheng's 4th Company had already met up with Xiao Feng's 1st Company. The soldiers of the two companies were naturally in high spirits. Tonight's battle could be said to be extremely satisfying. Everyone had obtained a lot of gains. Compared to them, the Ming army was far worse. Especially Sun Pua and the 1,000 Ming soldiers that followed the 4th Company. They carried out their mission very well, running and running all the way, acting very well. No, it should be said that without the 4th Company at the back, they would have already collapsed, or rather, they would have already collapsed. After retreating 5 miles to the west of Willow Town, the 4th Company and the 1st Company met up, and they had more than 3,000 Ming soldiers. However, this strength was not enough to stop the charging Ming army. Borromeo's troops, in other words, the plan did not have any intention of stopping them. Instead, the Ming army started to retreat like the tide, leaving a path to Willow Town. Willow Town. Walla's vanguard general, Nai Gong, ordered his warriors to charge forward and back a few times. After losing soldiers, they finally knew the power of the Ming army that surrounded them. The original 10,000 people quickly became less than 4,000 people. They finally became well-behaved and did not struggle. Instead, they went from attacking to defending, preparing to wait for reinforcements to arrive. Without waiting for too long, Borromeo's troops entered Willow Town from the west. The moment he entered the town, he saw injured vanguard warriors everywhere. Borromeo was in disbelief. Was this still the vanguard army that did not put the heroes of the world in their eyes? This was exactly the same as the great Ming army that was defeated in the Tumu incident. Finally seeing Borromeo, Naigong, a 7-foot man, was so emotional that he almost cried. With a plop, he half knelt in front of Borromeo, praising the strength of the Ming army and his failure to break out of the encirclement. Naigong was a fierce general, and he rarely put other people in his eyes. Even though Borromeo was Yeshin's younger brother like the dead Sai Yanwang, he still did not put them in his eyes. For him to half kneel in front of Borromeo, one could imagine how big of a blow he had suffered, to the point where he could even give up half of his dignity. Is the Ming army really that powerful? After hearing his grandfather's description, Borromeo had a bad feeling in his heart. Along the way, he had fought with the Ming army. Along the way, he had advanced triumphantly and had not seen much resistance. However, when he thought about how only his own warriors had died along the way and not a single Ming army corpse, Borromeo felt that something was not right. However, he could not put his finger on it. Logically speaking, with his current military strength, even if the Ming army wanted to play some tricks, what did he have to fear? Not to mention that he had met up with Nigong's troops. Facing the encirclement of 10,000 Ming soldiers, what could they do to him? In the end, it all depended on strength. Without enough strength, even if you used tactics well, what could you do? Since when can seeing a sheep kill a wolf? Borromeo did not know. It was true that the Ming army was a sheep, but there was also a tiger working with them. Although it was only a cub, when it opened its mouth and bared its fangs, it was still very frightening. It could also swallow an adult wolf. Chapter 211. Report. We suddenly discovered a large number of Ming soldiers at the west side of the town. They are blocking our way back. A Walla scout ran to Borromeo and knelt on the ground, reporting everything he saw. Borromeo was still trying to figure out what was wrong when he heard the scout's report. His eyes lit up, and he quickly figured out all the problems. But then, his face was filled with disbelief. According to his thoughts, the Ming army wanted to surround him and Nigong's troops and then eat them all. But the report said that the army only had 10,000 people. Did they have the ability to do this? What was going on? Even if the report was wrong and the Ming army came to the capital, how could the Ming army, who had just suffered 2 defeats at the hands of Tumu and Shihong, have such courage? Borromeo thought and decided to go to the west side of the town to take a look. General Nigong also had a face of disbelief as he followed behind Borromeo to the west side of Willow Town. 50 li away from Willow Town, Walla's rear army was resting under the command of their leader, Yeshen. In front of them were the 2 armies he sent out. This night, Yeshen slept exceptionally well. After seeing the Ming army's main force destroyed, he didn't think that there was anyone who could threaten him. But what Yeshen didn't know was that at this moment, 800 steps away from his tent, Yang Chendong had already arrived. He stood on an inconspicuous small hill and used a night vision telescope to look down at everything in his camp. The layout of the camp is somewhat loose on the outside but tight on the inside. Yang Chendong slowly lowered the binoculars in front of his eyes. A gentle and confident smile appeared on his face. "Young master, should we inform them to move?" The tall Beta Persei, who was more than 8 feet tall, asked in a heavy voice. "Yes, use the radio to inform Tiger's Mane that we can move." Yang Chendong nodded lightly. Now, everything was going according to his plan. This made him feel like he was in control of the world. In fact, for this operation, Yang Chendong did pay a lot. At least, he took out a lot of good things from the warehouse. On the surface, the warehouse was a large military warehouse for the country. Not only were there some advanced weapons produced in the country, but there were also some weapons that were ready to be deployed. There were also some cutting-edge weapons that were collected from all over the world for self-research purposes. And now, all of this was under Yang Chendong's control. This time, in order to effectively attack the Walla's army and achieve his goal, he specially mobilized the FGT-203mm towed artillery from the warehouse. The FGT-203mm towed artillery was the largest caliber field artillery developed by China. It was developed by the Northern Industrial Company. This system was mainly used by military-level combat units. It had a long range, great power, and high accuracy. It could be equipped with a variety of special ammunition. It was the backbone of long-range firepower. Although the artillery was dismounted, its range exceeded that of the same type of artillery in the United States and Russia, and it was given the title of Asia's first artillery. The FGT-203mm towed artillery was very cumbersome, and its mobility was not as good as other artillery. In addition, it was easy to expose the target, and it was slow to retreat after being attacked. It was precisely because of these shortcomings that its development was eventually stopped. There was an FGT-203mm towed cannon in the warehouse, and it was displayed as an antique. This time, Yang Chendong took it out. In addition to wanting to review the power of this cannon, he also relied on the fact that the warehouse only needed to place the cannon in one place, and there was no need for it to be moved. Also, this artillery had an effective range of 50 kilometers, and its lethality was very large. It was perfect for him to use in this battle. The FGT-203mm towed artillery was taken out and placed in a hidden place. Yang Chendong didn't forget to bring Hu Meng and Long Song's first platoon of the second company to the artillery. When they found the artillery, these experienced Long Feng soldiers widened their eyes. The FGT-203 towed artillery was very powerful. It could hurt both enemies and oneself. Once such a heavy firearm appeared, Yang Chendong had always been very careful. He brought his most trusted subordinate, Tiger's Mane, with him so that he could be in charge of using the artillery. After handing the FGT-203 towed artillery to Tiger's Mane, he did some simple operations and told the other cold front soldiers how to fire the artillery. He also told them in detail the exact location of the artillery. After that, Yang Chendong left a long-range radio communicator and arrived outside the Walla army camp. Looking at the sleeping enemy in front of him, he felt that it was time to wake them up. Use the radio to inform Tiger's Mane that we can move now. Let's hope he can hit more accurately, Yang Chendong said as he led the cold front soldiers and 2nd Platoon and 3rd Platoon of 2nd Company to retreat. After all, this was a cannon. There was a chance of accidental damage. If they were killed by their own artillery before they could hit the enemy, there would be no way to explain themselves. Beta Persei clumsily used the radio to contact Tiger's Mane. After telling him the 6th young master's intention, Tiger's Mane, who was in a mountain valley about 30 kilometers away, gave the order to fire the artillery with a serious expression. There were 2 FGT-203 towed cannons in total. Under Tiger Light's command, Long Feng's brothers, who had systematically and seriously studied artillery knowledge, began to operate the cannons in an orderly manner. They weren't very familiar with it. After the necessary procedures were carefully carried out, a golden artillery shell that could only be carried by an adult was sent into the barrel. Under Tiger's Mane's order, one of the FGT-203 towed artillery cannons that had its coordinates adjusted by Yang Chendong let out a roar. After a sudden tremble, flames whizzed out of the muzzle and flew straight into the Walla army camp about 30 kilometers away. Most of the Walla soldiers were immersed in their dreams. This time, they had gained a lot of benefits. Many of the soldiers' faces were filled with satisfied smiles. But all of this was interrupted by a deafening sound. Boom! A roar like a small earthquake sounded, and then the artillery shell landed in the Walla army camp, producing a huge flame that spread out from the center. The shrapnel of the bomb was like countless meteorites flying in the sky, piercing through one tent after another, producing bursts of wailing and howling. Not far away, Beta Persei and the others looked at the mushroom-like flames. Although they were prepared, they were still stunned. But soon, this shock turned into worship, and their eyes fell on Yang Chendong, who was standing in the middle of them. At this time, Yang Chendong was smiling. He was happy that he hadn't forgotten about his work. The artillery shell was still very accurate. This was also thanks to the fact that in his previous life, the country found more than a dozen artillery experts to train him for a month to complete a mission. At that time, he was so busy that he didn't even have time to sleep. Looking at the results now, he felt that everything was worth it. Inform Tiger's Mane, adjust the target to the left and right, and fire the second shell. Since the coordinates were prepared, Yang Chendong had nothing to be afraid of. He continued to give orders to Beta Persei, asking him to use the radio communicator to inform Tiger's Mane 30 miles away. At this moment, the Walla army camp was already in a mess. Even the soldiers who were usually sleeping were awakened by the loud noise. Some of them, wearing simple pajamas, rushed out of their tents and looked at the mess in front of them. From time to time, they would rub their eyes to make sure that this was not a dream, but reality. Just when everyone was still in a daze and wondering what was going on, the second shell fell as scheduled. The landing point was 50 steps to the left of the first shell. With another loud noise, some unlucky soldiers stood in the area of the bombardment. At that moment, they successfully fulfilled their childhood dream and flew into the sky. But this was just a flash in the pan. Soon, they fell to the ground under the influence of gravity. However, when he landed on the ground, there was not the slightest sign of life. The artillery fire in the dark night was dazzling and eye-catching. Yang Chendong and the others were enjoying everything in front of them as if they were watching fireworks. In contrast, the Walla army camp was already in a mess. Leader Yesin had already been awakened. He was wearing a cloak, and under the protection of the soldiers, he looked blankly at the balls of fire one after another. His lips were trembling, and he seemed to be mumbling something at the moment. Yeshin was indeed stunned by the scene in front of him. He had never seen or even dared to imagine a scene so real in front of him, making him feel like he was in a dream. However, the cries of the soldiers were so real, and the smell of blood was so thick. The cruel reality was telling him that everything was so real, and there was not the slightest hint of falsehood in it. "Leader, let's leave this place quickly. It's too dangerous here." A trusted aide watched as the flames that could devour lives fell around them from time to time. He was afraid that the next moment it would threaten the safety of his master. Thus, he hurriedly reminded his master of the situation. "Wait, it stopped. Just as he instinctively wanted to nod his head and abandon the warriors who supported him, everything suddenly became quiet again. Although there were still fires burning and the screams of the soldiers were incessant, there was no more gunfire. The danger seemed to have gone away. Chapter 212. Report. Just when everyone was still trying to figure out what was going on, just when they were not sure if the wrath of the heavens would descend again, a scout hurried to Yeshin and knelt on the ground. There was a trace of panic in his voice as he said, "Leader, there is a Ming soldier outside the camp. He said he has a letter for you." "Where is he?" When he heard that a Ming soldier dared to come to the camp, Yeshin's eyes narrowed. A boundless killing intent and anger rose from the bottom of his heart. "He is under the control of our brothers." The scout felt his leader's killing intent and did not even dare to raise his head as he answered, "Kill him." When his trusted aides heard that a Ming soldier was under control, they immediately shouted loudly. It was as if killing the messenger would not be enough to quell the anger in their hearts. "Wait a moment." Yeshen waved his hand lightly. "Let's see what is written in the letter first." Since he dared to come and deliver a letter, he must be someone who dared to die. Even if someone like him was killed, it would not be of much benefit to Walla. It was better to see the other party's intentions first and understand his thoughts before speaking. Walla took the letter and opened it in his hand. Immediately, the vigorous and powerful Chinese characters appeared in his eyes. The letter was written by Yang Chendong himself, and the calligraphy he had been practicing for a while finally came in handy. Leader Yeshin Junjian. This lightning was inevitable because of marquee actions. It is because Walla made such a big fuss and went against the harmony of the heavens. However, the heavens are virtuous. Marquis cannot bear to continue causing suffering and is willing to turn weapons of war into gifts of jade and silk. If you're willing, you can leave the city for a while. On the other hand, if the lightning continues, I am afraid that Walla's army will cease to exist. What choice do you have? Please think thrice before you act. Ming Dynasty's loyal Marquis Yang Chendong. There were not many words, but the purpose of the letter was very clear. According to the letter, the fiery light that could easily kill people was caused by Yang Chendong's actions. If he wanted to prevent such things from happening again, it was very simple. He just needed to leave the city for a while, and he would know the requirements. Yeshen didn't answer immediately. Instead, he passed the letter to his trusted aides. After they read it, they immediately gave their opinions. Some people said that they couldn't go out. This must be the trick of the loyal Marquis, in order to trick the leader into going out to look for the killing opportunity. Others said that there was no need to be afraid of Liao Ming. Since they wanted to kill people, then they had to be prepared to be killed in return. Once the two sides met, they would not be far from each other. At that time, Walla's elite cavalry would slaughter everything. When Yeshen heard this, his expression changed again and again. When he saw the messy barracks, as well as the countless injured subordinates, he finally said fiercely, "This leader wants to see what this loyal Marquis has to say. Men, gather 1,000 elite warriors and go out with this leader to meet him." Bringing 1,000 brothers, this was Yeshen's method of self-protection. He must meet with Yang Chendong. Apart from the fact that he didn't want to be hit by the huge power of the cannon, he also wanted to hear what the loyal Marquis had to say. It was easy to select 1,000 elite cavalry from tens of thousands of soldiers. After a while, they were gathered and followed Yeshen out of the camp. 3 miles away from the camp, Yang Chendong stood on a protruding slope and looked into the distance under the protection of Beta Persei, Chiovi's first guard team, and 60 soldiers. Young master, Yang Wu will be fine, right? Beta Persei had a rare look of nervousness. When he thought of Yang Wu, who was sent to deliver the letter, his heart was filled with irritation. Nothing will happen. You have to believe in this young master. Yang Chendong still had a confident look on his face. He believed that since Yes Hin could stand out among the Walla generals, he was not a short-sighted person. When two armies fought, they would not kill the messenger, not to mention the threats in the letter. As long as they were not reckless people, they would definitely not do anything to Yang Wu who delivered the letter. Of course, there were exceptions to everything. Beta Persei's worry was not without reason. In order to comfort him, Yang Chenong added, if Yang Wu and his brothers were injured by the enemy, then this young master will bury the entire Walla army with them. At that time, no one will be left alive. His voice was so indifferent, without the slightest murderous intent or anger. But from this sentence, Beta Persei could clearly hear Yang Chendong's determination. He thought that for the life of one of his brothers, he would bury the entire Walla army with them. Suddenly, he was a little envious of Yang Wu. His own death in exchange for such a spectacular scene, it seemed worth it no matter how he looked at it. This sentence was not only heard by Beta Persei, but also by all the brothers who were protecting Yang Chendong. For some reason, at this moment, they just felt a rush of hot blood in their bodies, making it difficult for them to calm down. It was as if they had to do something. In the midst of this restlessness, a group of troops came from not far away. It was not very clear in the night, but based on their instincts, everyone could feel that there should be a large number of people, at least 10 times more than them. Walla's troops had indeed appeared. At this moment, all the restlessness in the hearts of the Long Feng's troops disappeared. This was the ability of a veteran of hundreds of battles. No matter what kind of emotions they had, once they entered a state of war, they would always be able to recover their body and mind to their best state in the shortest time possible. Young master, they're here. Yang Wu led the way, and after seeing Yang Chendong, he quickly rode over on his horse. In the process of approaching, the Walla army was considered to be well-behaved. No one moved recklessly, and there was no sound of horses neighing. It was so quiet that it seemed like they were elites. Very good. Thank you for your hard work. Yang Chenong chuckled, and then Beta Persei led a snow-white horse over from the side. Yang Chendong leaped lightly and landed on the horse. Then, he moved forward. Young master. Yang Chendong's actions caused the Long Feng's troops behind him to shout in unison. In response, Yang Chendong reined in his horse and stopped. He turned to the crowd and revealed a bright smile, saying, I believe that with all of you here, this young master will definitely be fine, right? No one answered, but they all nodded in unison. Their uniform movements showed the attitude of these Long Feng's troops. They swore in their hearts that as long as they were still alive, they would never let the sixth young master's personal safety be threatened in the slightest. Ha ha! Seeing how confident the Long Feng's troops were, Yang Chendong could not help but laugh to the sky. Then, he slowly rode forward on his horse and shouted loudly, The great Ming's loyal marquis wishes to see leader Yesin. Do you dare to meet him? Why wouldn't I dare? A similar shout came from the other side of the night. Then, a strong horse leaped out of the troops and came forward. The distance between the two parties was less than 3 li. The place where they met was between the two parties. Then, the two stopped 10 steps away from each other. Yesin leaped out on his horse with a grand aura. Of course, the reason he dared to do so was because he believed that this area was safe. However, he did not know that under the cover of night, the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad had quickly approached and completely included him in the range of being killed at any time. Yang Chendong and Yesin looked at each other. When he saw that the other party was looking at him seriously, he smiled and said, As expected of the leader of the Walla, your boldness is admirable. You're too kind. The loyal marquis is indeed a rising star of the great Ming dynasty. You actually dare to meet me at such a close distance. It can be seen that you are also a bold person. Then, tell me, what is this so-called heavenly lightning all about? Also, don't try to fool me with some nonsense about ghosts and gods. I have lived for so long, and I do not believe in such things. I only believe in one thing, and that is myself and my own strength. Yes, Hin wanted to gain the upper hand by a show of strength. He had killed his way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Only then did he have his current achievements and position. He did not believe that a scholar of the great Ming dynasty who was less than 20 years old and only knew how to read books every day would have any knowledge. As long as he could successfully suppress the other party, it would be easy to get the truth. Once he knew the truth, whether to talk or kill would be completely up to him. To Yang Chendong, it sounded like a joke to him that he was the first to come up and threaten him. If he did not want to keep Yesen to continue pressuring the great Ming dynasty and create enough space and time for his own development, he was afraid that there would not be this meeting at all. Instead, he would have directly dealt with Yesen. He had his own plan, so he did not touch Yesen. But now, this person had other ideas. It was ridiculous to think about it. Looking at Yesen, who was still pretending to be angry, Yang Chendong shrugged indifferently. Marquis knows how to use divine techniques. If you don't believe me, then it's easy. I can make the thunder reappear in minutes. Do you want to try? She originally thought that she had seen through Yang Chendong's trick, but she didn't expect him to be so calm at this time. Her eyes couldn't help but become a lot colder. Don't try to test this chief's bottom line, or you will regret it. I will regret it, huh? As if he had heard the biggest joke in the world, Yang Chendong looked up to the sky and roared. Then, he suddenly stopped. Then, his right hand turned into a fist and gently pushed forward. This was a signal to Beta Persei behind him to fire. Beta Persei had been watching the sixth young master's every move. Seeing that he had made his move, he immediately used the radio station to call for Tiger's mane. Although he stretched out his hand, the thunder that should have appeared did not immediately appear. Yesen was nervous at first, but his face soon relaxed. Ha ha ha, let's see. Reality will expose all your lies. Boom. A loud noise came out and landed in the barracks behind Yesen. The walla tent that had just quieted down was once again filled with cries and shouts. Chapter 213. The smile on Yeshen's face froze in an instant. Then, it became very ugly. The sky thunder killed his loyal warriors. He glared at Yang Chendong and shouted, "What are you doing? Don't you know that we are still negotiating?" Yang Chendong ignored Yeshen's roar. Instead, he grinned and revealed a sinister smile. Then, he switched to his left hand and gestured at the warhorse under Yesen. As if to coordinate with this gesture, a bullet suddenly flew out from an unknown place and shot into his strong warhorse. The originally strong horse suddenly neighed in pain and fell to its knees with a plop. The sudden movement of the warhorse caught Yesen off guard. He fell from the warhorse without any warning. Because he was quite skilled, he did not get his face covered in dust. He only staggered a little and his body tilted a little, but he quickly returned to his original state. With a push of his right hand and a tap of his left hand, Yesen was no longer as unforgiving as before. He became much more obedient. However, the soldiers behind him did not know what happened. When they saw their leader fall from the warhorse, they thought that something bad had happened. Suddenly, 5 strong horses rushed out and leaped straight at him. "Fall, all of you." Since he wanted to establish his might, he naturally wouldn't give the other party a chance. Under Yang Chendong's angry roar, the Ghost Shadow Sniper team ambushed behind him took action. The 5 warhorses were locked in an instant. Only half of the way forward, they fell to the ground one by one. With night vision goggles and advanced sniping techniques, Bai Zhua and his team members had complete control of the small battlefield. Above, seeing that 5 of their own warriors had fallen, the other Vala people were still shouting in disbelief. However, they were the first to react quickly. They turned around and gathered their chi and their dantian, shouting loudly, "All of you, stop. Without my orders, no one is to act rashly. Otherwise, you will be punished by military law." Yesen was really scared. He was frightened by Yang Chendong's gesture. He could not see what the other party did, but his men died one by one. Could it be that he really knew some kind of magic? Yesen, who had doubts in his heart, quickly analyzed that Yang Chendong did not mean to kill him. Otherwise, why would he talk so much nonsense? If he pointed at him, Wouldn't he die on the ground like the other Walla cavalry? Since he knew that Yang Chendong did not want to kill him, he was calm. First, he stopped his men from acting rashly. Then, when he looked at Yang Chendong, his tone became much gentler. He even asked with a hint of respect, "Tell me, what do you want? I don't think you want to kill me, right?" "That's right." Yang Chendong clapped his hands as if he was praising Yeshen's understanding. However, this slap gave him a fright. He instinctively tensed up his body and prepared to defend himself at any time. It was as if he thought that this slap was some kind of demonic technique. Yang Chendong did not ridicule Yeshen's loss of composure. Instead, he said in a calm tone, "In the eyes of Marquis, your life is the same as the other Walla people's lives. It is not worth a penny more. Therefore, Marquis has no need to kill you. This time, I asked you to come out to talk to you about the Walla army retreating." "Retreating?" Yeshen was puzzled. "Yes, it's retreating. Of course, if you don't retreat, Marquis also has the ability to kill all of you here, just like in the Tumu Castle. Although you have fewer people, you still managed to kill 500,000 soldiers of the Great Ming dynasty." Yang Chenong knew what the other party was suspecting. It was nothing more than the lack of military strength, so he casually gave an example. As soon as he heard about the Battle of the Tumu Castle, Yeshen's face showed a proud expression, but after he understood what Yang Chendong meant, his face changed instantly. "Do you think you can be like our Walla warriors and win with fewer people? What? Do you think the effect of the heavenly thunder is still not enough? If that's the case, then Marquis doesn't mind a few more." Yang Chendong saw that Yeshen still wanted to get lucky. His face changed immediately, and then he slowly raised his right hand again. This action made Yeshen's expression change. "Wait, I believe you." Yeshen couldn't help but be nervous. The effect of the heavenly thunder was too powerful. A casual strike could kill hundreds and thousands of people. If such a heavenly thunder struck again, he was worried that Walla's morale would be destroyed. If that was the case, how could they still talk about dominating the Great Ming dynasty? Yeshen finally became obedient, and Yang Chendong naturally withdrew his right hand. "How is it? Do you agree to retreat?" "I agree. This chief will order the entire army to retreat," Yisien said in a somewhat dispirited manner. This time, he had come full of confidence, but he returned in disappointment. If it was anyone else, their expression would not be good. "No, no, no." Who knew that when Yang Chendong heard that the whole army should retreat? He shook his head. "We have to retreat, but not like this." Marquis remembered correctly. In the Tumu Castle, you should have captured a lot of Ming dynasty soldiers. Now send them back. If there is one less person, you don't have to go back. "What? Are you threatening me?" When he heard that Yang Chendong wanted all the captives, Yeshen's expression changed. He widened his eyes, as if he was going to fight for his life. Yang Chendong, who had already controlled the situation, acted as if he didn't see Yeshen's so-called fierce face. "Marquis is threatening you." "What? Are you not convinced?" "If that's the case, Marquis doesn't mind using the heavenly thunder to destroy you. After that, Marquis will lead the army into Walla. When that time comes, not only will the Great Ming dynasty's captives be taken back, even the women and children of Walla will become the Great Ming dynasty's captives. Do you believe me?" Yang Chendong said without showing any weakness. These words were like thousands of needles piercing Yeshen's heart, making him unable to refute. If it was someone else who said this, he might laugh out loud and give the order to kill them. However, these words came from Yang Chendong's mouth. Thinking back to the various actions just now, he was really worried that the other party would do this. In the face of such a powerful heavenly thunder, could the Walla cavalry really withstand it? While Yeshen was still thinking about how to deal with it, Yang Chendong continued to speak. "Marquis only asked you to return the captives. He didn't ask for the gold and silver that you robbed. This is already extra lenient. Furthermore, in Willow Town dozens of miles away, your vanguard army is surrounded by Marquis. If you return the Great Ming dynasty's captives, Marquis can also let these people go. This is a fair trade. If you don't agree, then there's no need to talk. Marquis will kill you within 3 breaths." After speaking, Yang Chendong gently raised his left hand. This action clearly meant to kill Yeshen. He had already seen the serious consequences of reaching out his left and right hands, so he didn't dare to test the law. He immediately shouted, "Wait, this is such a big matter. No matter what, this chief has to go back and discuss it with his subordinates first. I'm sorry, before all the great Ming dynasty's captives are released, you can't leave here." Yang Chendong shook his head and said with a look that said, "Don't play tricks, it's useless to think about it. Are you going to take me as a hostage?" Yeshin said very discontentedly when he heard this. It was just that after saying this sentence, he didn't speak anymore. The reality was already like this. Wasn't it too late for him to react now? He couldn't leave, and he couldn't beat him. Reality forced Yeshin to agree to Yang Chendong's conditions. However, although he agreed, Yeshin was still a little worried. Would Yang Chendong act shamelessly? Therefore, after hesitating for a while, he raised his head and said, "Loyal Marquis, but I don't know if you will let me go if I release the captives. Also, will you release all the besieged warriors in Walla?" Seeing that Yeshin also wanted to make a request, Yang Chendong said indifferently, "What? Do you think that other than believing in Marquis, you have the qualifications to negotiate with Marquis? You." After being said this by Yang Chendong, Yeshin's face changed again and again. It was obvious that he was very angry. "Haha, Marquis is joking with you. In fact, with your intelligence, you can think about it. If Marquis wanted to kill you, why would he talk nonsense with you? As for the captives of the great Ming, Marquis can bring his army to kill them after killing all of you. Presumably, Walla doesn't have the strength to stop the great Ming's army now. However, Marquis didn't do this, which is already a kind of sincerity. As for your people who are besieged in Willow Town, I have to trouble you to send someone to inform them not to try to break out of the encirclement. Tell them to stay here obediently and wait for the results of our negotiation. Naturally, they will be released. During this period, if anyone dares to act rashly, they will only die. Don't blame Marquis for not reminding you." Since he had already said this, Yeshin had to accept it even if he didn't want to. However, after thinking about it carefully, Yang Chendong didn't seem to have the intention to destroy Walla. Otherwise, he could do it now and Yeshin wouldn't have the strength to fight back. There was no other choice. Yeshin was forced by Yang Chendong's strength and finally lowered his head. He turned around and shouted to the army behind him. He called a few fast horse scouts and arranged them to inform the brothers in Willow Town not to act rashly. In addition, they were to inform the captives of the great Ming army to escort them back to the loyal Marquis. After the order was given, the scouts left. Yang Chendong smiled and waved his hand. The first guard captain, Chiu Vi, brought people to deliver wine and food to Yeshin. "Leader Walla, the night is long and there are too many things to do. Why don't we drink while waiting?" Yeshin looked at the wooden table in front of him, as well as the hot food and wine. He was even more surprised in his heart. The loyal Marquis of the great Ming seemed to have calculated everything and knew that he would compromise. He even prepared wine and food. Well, there was nothing to say. Let's eat first. Chapter 2:14. Willow Town. After Borromeo met up with General Nigong, he tried to charge out a few more times, but they all ended in failure. After many warriors died, the morale of the army began to waver. When faced with the general's order to break out of the encirclement, not many people were willing to go along with it. Charging out despite knowing that they would die wasn't bravery, but recklessness. Everyone only had one life. Who was willing to die so carelessly? As they waited and broke out of the encirclement, the sky gradually began to brighten. It also welcomed the scouts sent out by Yeshin. When the scouts arrived and said that their leader didn't want them to break out of the encirclement and to wait in Willow Town, the first to disagree was Borromeo. This time, he came with great ambition, but suffered heavy losses time and time again. This made him feel great shame. Seeing that the sky was already bright, the problem that restricted their vision was solved. It was time to charge out, but he was told to stay in place and wait for orders. How could he be willing to accept that? Did my big brother really say that? Does he know that we have already investigated that there are only a few thousand Ming soldiers surrounding us? With our 20,000 soldiers, we can definitely charge out. When that time comes, it will be our time of great victory. Borromeo said to the scouts with a face of unwillingness. Unfortunately, these scouts didn't have any status. They were only here to pass on a message. They couldn't give any reply to Borromeo's words. Seeing that the scouts didn't say anything, Borromeo straightforwardly shook his head. You said that my big brother is facing off against the loyal Marquis, right? That's good. Say, if you suddenly charge out of Willowtown and come behind the loyal Marquis, do you think you can eliminate him with a pincer attack? If that's the case, will there be anyone in the great Ming dynasty who dares to oppose the Walla? There shouldn't be anyone. The scouts seemed to have seen some hope as they replied. In reality, the scouts didn't really understand the order this time. However, since their leader had spoken, they had to carry it out. Seeing that the scouts he sent agreed with his suggestion, Borromeo couldn't help but be overjoyed. Good. Since the people sent by Big Brother have agreed, then we will do as this general says. As soon as Borromeo finished speaking, the vanguard general beside him immediately raised a different opinion. We can't do that. The scouts are only there to relay orders. They don't understand the situation on the battlefield at all, so we should listen to the leader. The scouts don't understand the situation on the battlefield, but we do. General Nigong, don't tell me that you've become discouraged and scared after being defeated a few times in one night. You're our Vala's general. You should be brave and fearless. Borromeo said with a mocking smile. After being refuted by Borromeo, the general's expression changed again and again. However, he was not good with words and didn't know what to say. In the end, he simply turned his head away and used his actions instead of his mouth to express himself. If you want to disobey, then go ahead. This general will listen to the leader's orders and stay in Willowtown obediently. There were less than 4,000 soldiers left in the original vanguard army, which did not affect the overall situation. Since it didn't make sense, Borromeo decided to just ignore it. He would just lead the army forward. At that time, he would kill the great Ming's loyal Marquis, and the credit would be his alone. Perhaps it was because he couldn't wait any longer, or perhaps it was because he wanted to make a contribution that child Borromeo ignored his elder brother's orders and began to gather his troops. Taking advantage of the darkness of the sky, he headed for the western end of Willowtown and made a counterattack. The sky was already bright. Commander Xiaofeng and Commander Wu Sheng, who were in charge of guarding here, could also clearly see some of the situation in Willowtown. With the help of binoculars, they could see even further than the enemy. The Walla soldiers in the town suddenly began to gather. This scene was clearly captured by the two of them, and they quickly guessed the enemy's intentions and thoughts. Inform Sir Tiger's man to prepare artillery support at any time. They knew that the Walla cavalry in town outnumbered them by 10 times. For safety reasons, it was also the 6th young master's order to inform Tiger's man to prepare once they discovered something that couldn't be disobeyed. Xiaofeng and Wusheng didn't dare to be careless and quickly made preparations. In less than an hour, the west side of Willowtown suddenly became much more lively. Countless Walla cavalry charged out from here. Borromeo even took the initiative to lead the charge. He wanted to use his actions to inspire the other warriors to charge out of Willowtown and kill the great Ming's loyal Marquis. They're coming out, they're coming out. Everyone get ready. Inform Sir Tiger's man to prepare artillery support. After seeing countless enemies appear in front of their eyes, Xiaofeng and Wu Sheng both gave military orders to their own cold front soldiers. At the same time, they used the radio communicator to inform Tiger's man that they could fire. After Tiger's man received Xiaofeng and Wu Sheng's request for reinforcements, he immediately loaded another FGT 203mm toad cannon that hadn't fired yet. One of the two FGT 203mm toad cannons was aimed at Yeshin's camp, while the other was aimed at Willowtown. At this moment, Tiger's man received the news and used the second cannon to fire. Borromeo was leading tens of thousands of Walla cavalry to charge out of Willowtown. Under his leadership, the morale of the army increased by a lot. Adding on the fact that they had a large number of people, they seemed to have an unstoppable momentum when they charged out of town. However, this seemingly powerful momentum was met with a hail of bullets from Xiaofeng's 1st Company and Wu Sheng's 4th Company. Over 100 cavalrymen fell to the ground. However, this momentum didn't seem to have any intention of fading. On the contrary, it became more and more intense. With the continuous charge, more and more Walla cavalry fell to the ground. It was to the point that the path forward was blocked by the corpses of the war horses and soldiers. But in the end, because there were too many cavalrymen, they still managed to charge out. Among the crowd, when Borromeo saw that they had made it out of the town, his face lit up with joy. Holding a saber in his hand, he shouted loudly, a bloodthirsty glint in his eyes. He wanted to charge forward and kill all the Ming soldiers who had heavily injured the Walla cavalrymen, letting them know what it meant to overestimate one's abilities. Seeing the Walla army charging out and getting closer and closer to them, the three commanders of the Ming army, Sun Tong, Yang Jie, and Mao Fusho, all had pale faces. Even though they still had 3,000 Ming soldiers under their command, they were all trembling in fear in the face of Walla's army. It looked like they would collapse at any moment. Boom! Just as the Ming army was in chaos and chaos was about to break out at any moment, just as Xiao Feng and Wu Shang were shooting with all their might with Long Feng, the enemy was getting closer and closer due to their disadvantage in numbers. Just as it was extremely dangerous, a loud explosion suddenly sounded above their heads. Following that, a cannonball landed in the middle of Walla's army. The cannonball landed right where the Walla cavalry were most concentrated. With just one cannonball, at least 100 Walla cavalry soldiers were killed. As for the number of people who were injured, it was even more uncountable. Unfortunately, Borromeo was in the crowd. His originally ferocious face was directly swallowed by the cannonball. Not even his bones were left. Borromeo died, along with nearly 100 cavalrymen and even more injured people. This cannonball also stunned the advancing Walla cavalry. Before this, they had some understanding of the cannons of the Ming dynasty. However, those cannons could only shoot out a heavy iron ball. The damage it could cause was only in a straight line. As long as they avoided the iron ball that could only attack in a straight line, their lives would not be in danger. How could it be like this cannonball that landed without any warning? Moreover, when it landed, under the flames, its lethality was so great that it gave people the feeling that there was no way to avoid it. The people who were stunned by the cannonball reined in their horses and stopped. Borromeo had died in battle. Without their commander, they felt like they did not know where to go. It was at this time that the second cannonball arrived. It once again landed in the crowd, causing the deaths of hundreds of cavalrymen and the injuries of hundreds of cavalrymen. Retreat. Seeing the soldiers around them being killed by the cannonballs and muskets, the morale that had just been built up instantly collapsed. The smart soldiers knew that if they retreated back to the town, they would not face such danger. In an instant, many of them retreated. This was like a plague that quickly spread. Other than the Walla cavalry at the front who could not turn back and became Long Feng's target, the rest of the Walla cavalry retreated back to the town. The battle finally ended with the death of nearly 2,000 people. The ground was littered with corpses and the smell of blood. It seemed like this battle was originally a child's play. The army retreated back to the town and Nai Gong took over the command. When he ordered everyone not to leave without orders, he also sent out scouts to inform leader Yesin of what had happened. The scouts rushed out of the town and rushed in front of Long Feng and the Ming soldiers with a terrified expression. Their faces were filled with fear, as if they were afraid that they would be killed by these murderous gods. If not for Yang Qindong's orders to allow the scouts to move back and forth, no one would be able to leave this place alive. The scouts rushed all the way and finally met with leader Yesin. They recounted in detail what had happened in Willowtown. When they mentioned that the child General Borromeo had been killed by the heavenly lightning, they did not even dare to raise their heads. Hearing that another brother had died on the battlefield, Yeshin's expression was naturally very ugly. However, he could not ask Yang Qindong for an explanation. It was his brother who did not listen to orders and took the initiative to fight. Now that he had died, who else could he blame? Forget it. Quickly inform the troops behind to bring all the captives of the Ming army here. Remember, all of them. Do not leave a single one alive. Whoever dares to leave behind the captives of the Ming army, I will leave behind his head. Yesin, who was really scared by Yang Qindong, did not dare to play any tricks. He issued a strict order to his troops. Chapter 215. In the Imperial Palace, Daizong Zhuqiyu was pacing back and forth in the throne room. Because he was worried about the battle ahead, He could no longer remain seated on the dragon throne. Standing below were all the fourth-rank officials in the capital and above. They all looked anxious and uneasy, and everyone had a grim expression on their faces. The battle to defend the capital had undoubtedly reached a critical juncture. It would take at least 3 days for the new order to rescue the emperor to arrive at the capital. If the loyal Marquis lost to Yesin, the entire capital would be in danger, and everyone's lives would be in danger. But an entire night had passed, and there had been no report from the front line. How could they not be worried? At this moment, many people began to miss the rule of having eunuchs supervise the army. If there were eunuchs present, they would have already sent someone back to report what had happened on the front line. They would not be like this, where everyone could only passively and anxiously wait. The officials had been here since early in the morning, but there was nothing they could do. Some of the officials were unwilling to wait. Seeing that there was nothing they could do, Minister of War Ming stepped forward with his ceremonial tablet and said, "Your Majesty, should we send someone to the front line to see what the situation is like? No matter what, we have to make preparations early." There were many explanations for what make preparations early meant. If they won, they naturally had to make preparations to celebrate. If they lost, they had to make preparations to flee. That's right, that's right. With Ming taking the lead, the other officials quickly responded. One by one, they stood up and spoke to the emperor. How could Zhu Qiyu not want to know the situation on the front line? For this reason, he had sent out many scouts and spies, but not a single one had returned. At this time, he truly didn't know who to send out. On the other hand, Great Eunuch Jin Ying's eyes turned as he thought of something. He carefully took 2 steps forward and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Your Majesty, we can send the embroidered uniform guard commissioner Hu Zhangning and request that he bring back the news." Hu Zhangning? Zhu Qiyu's brow creased as he began to think about this person. Zhu Qiyu, who had recently spent a lot of time to understand the officials, quickly figured out Hu Zhangning's identity. This person was not only the eldest son of the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao, but more importantly, he was also the father-in-law of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, Yang Chenong. The people that had been sent out earlier must have been stopped by Yang Chendong and were not allowed to return. However, if Hu Zhangning were to go and face his father-in-law, he would not be able to stop him. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but sigh at how smart Jining was. He immediately turned around and asked the officials, "Is Minister Hu Zhangning here?" "Your subject is here." When Hu Changning, who was standing behind the officials, heard the emperor's words, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he stepped forward with a board in his hand. When the officials saw that the emperor was calling for Hu Zhangning, they quickly opened up a path so that the guardian of the brocade guard could face the emperor directly. "Beloved Minister Hu, we now order you to bring people to the front lines to understand the situation of the battle, then quickly report back. Remember, you must complete this order as quickly as possible. Otherwise, you will be severely punished." Zhu Qiyu purposely emphasized the word severely in order to remind Hu Zhangning that it was his son-in-law who was leading the troops into battle. No one would make things difficult for him unless he wanted to make things difficult for himself. Hu Zhangning naturally understood Zhu Qiyu's meaning. In his heart, he did not want to make things difficult for his son-in-law. However, since he had the emperor's order, he did not dare to disobey. "Your subject obeys the emperor's order. I will definitely go and return quickly." After saying this, Hu Zhangning turned and left the hall. Seeing Hu Zhangning's figure disappear, Zhu Qiyu finally let out a long sigh of relief. Presumably, before long, there would be a report from the front lines. Hopefully, it would be good news. After Hu Zhangning left the palace, he brought along Lieutenant Gao and 2 other Hu family servants and headed straight for the northern side of the capital. Riding at top speed, they arrived at the east side of Willowtown in less than 4 hours. Here, they were stopped by a group of Ming soldiers from the 5 cities warden's office. In this team, there were 2 men in camouflage clothing who looked very energetic. "Who are you? Get off your horse and report your identity." Seeing that there were horses coming from the direction of the capital, the 2 men in camouflage clothing looked at each other and smiled. They had already stopped several groups like this. This was also Yang Chendong's intention. He wanted Zhu Qiyu to understand the cruelty of war and make him worried and afraid. If you wanted to make others afraid of you, It was not as simple as beating them up. Sometimes, raising a stick of pressure and not letting it fall would give people a feeling of intimidation. Seeing the Ming army blocking the road, Hu Zhongning, who was leading the group, knew that this should be the Ming army that was fighting against the Walla. He immediately let out a sigh of relief and reported his name. This official is the Imperial Guardian of the Embroidered Uniform Guard, Hu Zhongning. Under the Emperor's orders, I have come to investigate the situation of the battle. You only need to report the truth. What Imperial Guardian? I've never heard of him. Just tie him up as well. The two men in camouflage clothing chuckled. In front of them, the so-called Great Ming army did not have the slightest bit of deterrence. After laughing, they ordered the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office to tie up Hu Zhongning as usual. The Ming army seemed to be used to this kind of thing. They did not even blink as they walked toward Hu Zhongning and the other 3. Although they were Ming soldiers, after witnessing the power of the cold guards, they had already submitted to them in their hearts. In addition, they were just carrying out orders. If something happened, they did not have to take any responsibility. There was no need for them to be courteous. They just held the ropes and strode forward. Wait, what are you doing? Do you know who we are? Seeing that the Ming army was about to tie up Hu Zhongning, Lieutenant Gao Sheng, who was following by the side, shouted. At the same time, he pulled out the embroidered spring saber at his waist. When they saw Gao Sheng pull out the steel saber, a glint of excitement flashed across the eyes of the 2 cold guards. They were afraid that the people who came would not resist. If that happened, they would not be able to use their skills. Now, someone actually wanted to play tricks. This was exactly what they wanted. The 2 cold guards held 2 pitch black and cold 95 styles in their hands. One of them had already aimed his gun at the steel saber in Gao Sheng's hand. He was confident that he could break the saber with one shot. This way, the other party would not be able to resist. Stop! Hu Zhongning had long heard of the power of the advanced firearms in the mercenaries' hands. He did not want to take the risk. He immediately shouted at Gao Sheng to stop him from acting rashly. At the same time, he looked at the 2 cold guards and said, "Where is Yang Chendong? I am his father-in-law." When they heard someone call out the 6th young master's name, the 2 cold guards revealed a cold glint in their eyes. It was as if they were about to attack at any time. However, when they heard the next sentence, they were stunned. This person was actually the father-in-law of the 6th young master. If they really offended him, wouldn't they be severely punished later? At that moment, the 2 of them put down the 95 styles in their hands. One of them was still skeptical as he asked, "Are you really Marquis Yang's father-in-law?" Noticing the change in attitude of the 2 mercenaries, Hu Zhongning let out a long sigh and said proudly, "I'm the real deal. How about this? Call Yang Chendong over, and we'll know if it's real or not." Please wait for a moment. We'll call the company commander over." The 2 cold guards did not dare to act rashly. However, they would not completely believe the other party's words either. They decided to call the company commander, Tung Shan, over and let him determine if it was real or not. Hu Zhongning and the other 3 did not move. They were surrounded by more than 10 Ming dynasty soldiers. One of the cold guards stayed behind and stared at the 4 of them cautiously. From the looks of it, he seemed to be ready to attack at any time. Not long after, Tung Shan, who was also wearing a camouflage uniform but had the insignia of a major, hurried over. Tao Jin, the commander, came with him. As for Commander Gao Li, he stayed behind and was in charge of watching the Walla cavalry in Willow Town to prevent them from making any strange movements. Tung Shan did not know Hu Zhongning. However, he knew that the 6th young master had married Hu Yin as his first wife. This time, he brought Tao Jin over so that he could identify the people. Tao Jin was one of the commanders of the 5 cities' warden's office. Naturally, he was familiar with all the noble families in the capital. From afar, when he saw that the person who came was indeed Hu Zhongning, he hurriedly cupped his fist and said politely, "So it's Lord Hu. Please forgive me for not coming out to meet you." Since Tao Jin had said so, how could it be fake? Tung Shan immediately saluted politely and said, "This subordinate is the commander of the 3rd company of mercenaries. Greetings, Lord Hu." This company commander is too polite. Since the other party's attitude was so respectful, Hu Zhongning naturally greeted him with a smile. Then, he asked, Oh, right. Why don't I see the loyal Marquis? May I know where he is now? Lord Hu, young Marquis is not here. He is meeting with the Walla's leader, Yes Hin, at the front line. I don't know what business you have, but if you must meet with young Marquis, I will have to report it. Tung Shan said politely. He could ignore other people, but in front of Hu Zhangning, he could not put on any airs. Hearing that Yang Chendong was meeting with Yes Hin, Hu Zhangning was shocked and asked, "Meeting? Is there any danger?" There shouldn't be any danger for now, but I don't know the specific situation. Tung Shan shook his head. It was true that Hu Zhangning was the father-in-law of the sixth young master, but he was not a member of the Yang family, so there was no need for him to explain. He did not know the specific situation of Yang Chendong, but when he thought of the strength of the mercenaries and Yang Chendong's ability to plan ahead, Hu Zhangning was not too worried. I see, but how is the situation now? The Emperor is waiting for my reply. I don't know the specific situation, but what I can tell Lord Hu is that the Walla's army has been blocked by us outside Willow Town. They will not threaten the safety of the capital. Tung Shan hesitated for a moment and gave a rough explanation. As for the specific situation, without the authorization of the sixth young master, he would not reveal it. Chapter 216. Although he didn't see Yang Chendong, Tung Shan's answer was enough for Hu Zhangning to go back and report on his mission. A satisfied smile finally appeared on his face. Hu Zhangning quickly returned from the capital. He brought back the information he had gathered from the front line and the scouts he had sent out. He also explained in Tung Shan's words that he had no choice but to detain the scouts to prevent anyone from leaking information about the battlefield. He asked for the Emperor's understanding. Zhu Qiyu was indeed a little angry about the scouts being detained. But when he thought about how he still had to rely on Yang Chendong for the front line, how could he take such a small matter to heart? Especially when he heard Hu Zhangning say that the Walla army had been successfully stopped and that the capital was no longer in danger, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief and laughed with joy. Not only Zhu Qiyu, but the other important officials were also very happy when they heard that the capital was no longer in danger. Now, they just had to wait for Yang Chendong's triumphant return. At the front line, a large number of Ming captives were sent over. On the Ming army's side, Deputy Chief Yang Guang came forward with 5,000 cavalrymen and was responsible for escorting the captives back to the capital safely. When accepting the captives, Yang Chendong asked the crowd if there were any captives left in the Walla. After receiving the majority's answer that all the captives had been returned, Yang Chendong breathed a sigh of relief. The number of captives received this time was more than 75,000. Most of them were brave soldiers who had been through hundreds of battles. They were just scared out of their wits before, so they couldn't display their full strength on the battlefield. Yang Chendong could imagine that with these 75,000 captives, the safety of the capital would no longer be a problem. Zhu Qizhen could finally sleep without worry. He had successfully completed the important task of protecting the capital of the great Ming dynasty. As for whether these people would be used by Zhu Qiyu to deal with him in the future, Yang Chendong wasn't too worried. Firstly, he had the mercenaries in his hands, so he had to think carefully before making a move. Secondly, these people were all saved by him, so they would have a lot of resistance in their hearts to deal with him. Thirdly, Zhu Qizhen was still in Nanjing, so Daizong had to think carefully before making a move against him. With these 3 points, his safety shouldn't be a problem. After dealing with the captives, it was time to release the Walla army and let them leave. This was what worried Yesen the most. Previously, when he was controlled by someone, he had no choice but to do as Yang Chendong said. Now that the matter was done, would he keep his promise and let's release him and the tens of thousands of Walla cavalry? On this point, Yesen was a little worried. Everything was as Yang Chendong said before. If he really wanted to deal with the Walla, then he could directly take out a few more cannons from the warehouse. He didn't have to worry about not being able to defeat the Walla, but he didn't do so. He still knew the principle of putting away the bow after the birds are done. If he didn't leave a big enemy for Zhu Qiyu, then when he really wanted to deal with him, he would have no scruples. Therefore, when Yang Chendong released more than 20,000 captives from Willow Town and let them join Yes Hin, this person was so moved that he cried out. It was no wonder that he did this. The population of the Walla was not large, and there were even fewer young men who could fight. If all the captives were killed this time, then he would really become a commander without an army. He was afraid that when he returned to the grassland, he wouldn't be able to dominate the grassland, and it would be a miracle if he didn't get bullied by others. Seeing that more than 20,000 cavalry had safely retreated, when he looked at Yang Chendong, Yesen said in a very admiring tone, "Marquis of the Great Ming, you are a real man. You do what you say, which is admirable. If you're willing, the two of us can join forces. At that time, no one in the Great Ming will be our opponent. At that time, there will be gold, silver, treasures, and beautiful women for us to choose from. Isn't that better?" Yesen invited sincerely, and Yang Chendong's face showed a smile. "Leader Yesen, there is not only one Great Ming in the world. There are many countries and ethnic groups and places that we don't know about. Why do you only want to deal with the Great Ming?" Yang Chendong's answer made Yesen stunned. He didn't expect such an answer. He lowered his head, and after hesitating for a moment, he raised his head and said, "As you said, this world may be very big, but we can't even deal with the Great Ming. How can we talk about other grand plans?" "No, no, no." Yang Chendong stretched out his right index finger and made a shaking motion. "As the leader of the Walla, you must first have confidence in your captives. With them, you can achieve something. As for why you can't take down the Great Ming, it is because your strength is too weak. There is an old saying in the Central Plains, and I will give it to you here. To forge iron, you must be strong. Without enough strength, you can't achieve anything just by relying on the other party's mistakes. To forge iron, you must be strong." Yesen thought about this sentence thoughtfully. Yes, that's right. Walla doesn't lack soldiers who are brave enough to risk their lives. Your living environment and conditions made your men very brave at a very young age. On the battlefield, they can gallop everywhere. But do you know why they still failed? Yang Chendong nodded and guided Yesen. Why did they fail? This question was also what Yesen wanted to ask. Because your own ability to produce blood is insufficient. If you rely on robbing, this kind of ethnic group is destined to not go far. Yang Chendong chuckled and continued, "You lack all kinds of resources. You are complacent when you get something, and your ambition is satisfied. Since you are satisfied, you are not far away from the days when you lose. This is why although the Walla army is brave and can do some earth-shattering things from time to time, it can't escape the fate of being destroyed and replaced by others. In the end, it is because you can't win the hearts of the people. The reason you can't win the hearts of the people is because the people are not rich. They follow you, but in the end, they can't even fill their stomachs. Who would really risk their lives? On the other hand, if the country is rich and the people are strong, it means that someone wants to deal with you. In order to ensure the fruits of their victory, they have no choice but to take out their weapons and fight with their lives. One is spontaneous, the other is forced. Tell me, which one is more effective? Rich and the people are strong? Yesen was shocked by Yang Chendong's words. It was not that he didn't think about some things here, but he didn't know how to do it. Now that Yang Chendong brought up this problem, he should have a solution. Yesen said excitedly. The Ming dynasty's loyal marquis, but I don't know if there is a way to solve this problem. Of course there is. That is to develop commerce. The grassland is only rich in livestock. The natural environment makes you have a great demand for many other things. If they could start a business, then not only could they be self-sufficient, they could also sell their surplus to other places and earn a profit from the difference in price. They could also trade with people from other regions for things they needed. In short, they could earn more money, and gradually, Tao would become stronger. Once you have money, you will be able to do a lot of things. At that time, it will be much easier for you to expand again. Whether it is money or cavalry, you will be in an invincible position. When Yang Chendong said this, he seemed to have seen some kind of result. His face was full of excitement. At that time, the Tatars will not be a stumbling block for your expansion. On the contrary, they will become your base, the base of talent reserves. When you need soldiers, you can use a lot of gold and silver to make them work for you. In the north of your country, there is a country called Tsarist Russia. I think you should more or less know about it. That country is vast and rich in resources. Its area is much larger than the Ming dynasty, but its population is very small. That is the place you need to conquer. Remember Genghis Khan? Don't you want to be like your ancestors? A majestic strategic map was placed in front of Yeshin. After Yang Chendong said this, his heart was suddenly moved. It was like a person in the dark who saw the light, a person in a desperate situation who saw hope. It made Yeshin feel like he was reborn. Can we really do this? When he returned to reality, Yeshin said with some uncertainty, why can't we do it? The reason why the Ming dynasty has such a vast land and the prosperity of the people is the result of trade. If this is the case, why can't the Walla do it? Yang Chendong did not answer directly. Instead, he asked Yeshin a question in a rhetorical way. Yeshin could not answer this question, but he could continue to ask questions. So, does the loyal Marquis want the Walla and the Ming dynasty to stop attacking each other and resume trade? No. Yang Chendong shook his head. It is to establish trade with Marquis. This time, I'll be the one providing you with the goods. It won't be as simple as before, where I'll set up a horse farm to exchange for the goods you need with the Central Plains people. Instead, you will use silver to buy the goods I provide at a low price. Finally, through your hands, you will sell them at a high price. At that time, you will find that doing this will allow you to earn more silver. Then, you will be able to buy more things and do more things. In the end, Yang Chendong revealed his purpose. At the end of the day, Yang Chendong wanted to sell his goods and earn more silver to develop himself. At the same time, he wanted to increase his reputation. If he were to do the business himself, the speed would be too slow and the risk would be too great. If he really sent the Long Feng to protect him, he did not know how much manpower he would have to put in. This was not proportional to what he would gain. At least for now, there were not many Long Feng, so he could not split himself up. Chapter 217. But if he could convince Yeshin, then it would be different. The current Walla was equivalent to the king of the grassland, and very few people dared to provoke them. If they were the ones who transported the goods, perhaps some of the profits would be shared by the other party, but compared to what he earned, it was already a lot. With the help of Walla, he could sell things to the Eurasian continent, which was equivalent to stretching out his tentacles one step ahead. This would play a very positive role in conquering, ruling, and occupying that place in the future. This was Yang Chendong's real goal. Yeshin was indeed smart and cunning, but when facing Yang Chendong, these characteristics of his were useless. They were not on the same level at all. Whether it was thinking, knowledge, or martial strength, they were all on a completely different level. How could he be Yang Chendong's opponent? At this time, Yeshin not only did not know Yang Chendong's ultimate goal, but he was also attracted by the other party's idea of strengthening himself through trade. He was not short of money. This time, after defeating Yingzong, he seized a lot of gold and silver, which completely had the foundation to trade with Yang Chendong. Now what he had to consider was whether the bold and loyal Marquis words could be trusted, and why did the other party take the initiative to help him? Did he want to see the emergence of a powerful neighbor? If he couldn't figure this out, Walla didn't dare to make any decisions. Why are you helping me? Yeshin finally asked, which meant that he was seriously considering his own opinion. Yang Chendong was happy in his heart, but he didn't show the slightest expression on his face. On the contrary, he showed a seemingly very heavy expression and said, Marquis is from the great Ming dynasty, and my relatives and friends are here. Marquis really doesn't want to see them get hurt. As long as Walla doesn't invade, a lot of people can live. So Marquis wants to find a way out for you. A way out that doesn't invade the great Ming dynasty and can develop yourself. Yeshin couldn't help but nod his head when he heard such a high-sounding reason. Obviously, as a Walla, he did not want his people to be invaded by other countries. Of course, Marquis likes silver very much. With money, he could do more of the things he liked. Since trading with Walla can guarantee Marquis' interests, why not? Yang Chendong offered another reason while Yeshin was still deep in thought. Compared to the first reason, the second reason was much more practical. It also made Yang Chendong look more like an ordinary person. Ha ha. Hearing that, he burst into laughter. Obviously, this second reason was more persuasive and moved him. Because of this, he chose to believe in Yang Chendong. His loud laughter set the tone for the trade between the two sides. Then, they each put forward some requirements and conditions. For example, Yeshin's requirement was that the things Yang Chendong provided must be easy to sell and practical. If it was flashy, they had the right to refuse. Also, they could choose not to attack the Great Ming Dynasty, but if the Great Ming Dynasty took the initiative to find trouble with them, then they could not blame him for fighting back. Yang Chendong naturally agreed to Yeshin's requirements, but at the same time, he also put forward his own requirements. For example, after the goods arrived, they had to pay immediately. They were not allowed to owe anything. This was the basic integrity of a businessman. Also, he did not allow anyone from Walla to have any ideas about his goods and caravan. Not only that, they also had the responsibility and obligation to ensure the safety of the caravan. If the goods were intercepted and the Walla could not give an explanation, then he would use the heavenly thunder again. At that time, it would not be as simple as exchanging captives. It could be imagined that under the irresistible heavenly thunder, it was unknown whether the Walla could survive. Each side put forward their own requirements, and in the end, the Economic Association came to a consensus. With this matter settled, Yeshin excitedly left. Yang Chendong also turned and returned to the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. More than 70,000 Great Ming captives had been rescued. This would allow many broken families to be reunited. And all of this was because of Yang Chendong. On the way back, news of this matter would spread, causing these people to thank the loyalty marquis from the bottom of their hearts. This great hero who had saved them from fire and water, their great benefactor. The capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. The 12 city gates were opened, and the news spread to the capital. When the common people learned that more than 70,000 of their loved ones had been rescued, the streets were packed with people. They wanted to see if the rumors were true, and they also wanted to find their loved ones in the crowd. The first to enter the city were the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office. A total of 5,000 people, all of them holding their heads high and puffing out their chests, appeared to be in high spirits. In the past, they had played the role of maintaining law and order in the city. Most of the time, they were the thugs of some privileged classes and nobles, helping them bully the common people. It could be said that they were hated by the common people, but this time, it was completely different. He was returning to the city as a hero. Naturally, the welcome he received was extremely sincere and warm. When they saw the people on both sides of the road sincerely welcoming them, the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office were also moved. They suddenly realized that being a good person was far better than being a thug for evil people. After the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office entered the city, Yang Guang's 5,000 cavalry followed. In this battle, they did not fight a single battle with the Walla cavalry. They only used a single blade to obtain a complete victory. While obtaining military merits, each of them, like the officials of the 5 cities' warden's office, received some silver from the loyalty marquis. Ordinary soldiers received at least 10 taels of silver. The higher the official rank, the more they received. This kind of good job of obtaining both silver and merit made the 5,000 cavalry sincerely grateful to Yang Chendong. If not for the loyalty marquis, it was likely that they would not have been able to defend the capital and survive this time. After the 5,000 elite cavalry, it was the 75,000 Ming soldiers that entered the city. As soon as these people appeared, they were shocked. The scene became a little chaotic. There were too many people who saw their family members. Some saw their sons, some saw their husbands, and some saw their fathers. Immediately, there were waves of crying and shouting. Today was a day worth remembering for the capital. It was a day of triumphant return after winning the battle. It was also a day of joy and joy. Moreover, it was a day filled with cries of joy mixed with cries of joy. On the gate tower of the imperial city, Daizong Zhu Qiyu was standing there with the civil and military officials, watching the performance of the people in the city, watching the victorious army return to camp. There was a relaxed smile on everyone's face, especially Daizong Zhu Qiyu. Ever since he ascended the throne, Walla was like a sharp sword hanging over his head, as if it would fall and stab him at any time. Because of this, he could not sleep at night and could not eat. It was as if he was afraid that one day he would be defeated like his brother, Daizong Zhu Qijin. Now, Walla had retreated, and it was a very happy retreat. The battle report from the front said that they were retreating quickly. It was clear that they wanted to retreat to Walla's territory and did not want to be entangled with the great Ming Empire anymore. Being able to retreat was already very difficult, let alone being able to retreat so cleanly and cleanly. This was extremely rare. This also showed how powerful Yang Chendong was. There were also battle reports that this time, the Great Ming Empire sent out more than 10,000 people and returned with no casualties. On the contrary, Walla's army suffered heavy losses. Even their leader, Yeshin's younger brother, Bai Luomao, was killed on the battlefield. To be able to obtain such a great victory with almost no losses, this loyalty marquis must be a very formidable commander. While Zhu Qiyu was sighing at Yang Chendong's godlike leadership, he was also thinking about how to reward him. He won the battle, solved the threat in the capital, saved more than 70,000 captives, and brought peace to the Great Ming Empire. If he did not reward him for all these things, it was obviously impossible. The officials would not agree, the army would not agree, and the people would not agree. But what should he reward him for? After all, Yang Chendong was not even 20 years old, but he was already the loyal marquis of the Great Ming Empire. This had not happened even when the Great Ming Empire was founded. If he was rewarded, his official position would be too high. Would his achievements be greater than that of the town lord? Zhu Qiyu's throne could not be said to be completely stable. He could not be looking for a powerful imaginary enemy for himself, right? Your Majesty, the Minister of War, Ming, the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, have memorials. Just as Zhu Qiyu was thinking about Yang Chendong, head eunuch Jining placed a memorial in front of him. What is this? Zhu Qiyu asked casually. He reached out to take the memorial and opened it. As soon as he read it, his eyes lit up and he nodded repeatedly. It was really like a pillow being sent to him when he was sleepy. This was a memorial that the officials had recommended to reward the loyal marquis. It said that Yang Chendong can be rewarded with the title of loyal marquis. His fief will be 5,000 mu of grain fields around the Yang family's old residence in Jianing Prefecture. This was a diversion of disaster. The so-called loyal marquis was nothing more than a title that represented his high rank. But that was it. Just like duking Zhangfu in the past, even though he was an official, he was still bullied and humiliated by eunuchs without daring to speak up. But no matter what, after being bestowed the title of duke, it would represent the emperor's regard for Yang Chendong. Presumably, this would be able to shut the mouths of the people in the world. As for the fief, it would be given to Jianing Prefecture. That place could now be considered Zhu Qizhen's territory. Intentionally luring Yang Chendong there was indeed the intention of getting rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. But how could it not be a diversion of disaster? For this reason, Zhu Qizhen would probably be hopping mad. Chapter 218. It could be said that this memorial was very much in line with Zhu Qiyu's thoughts. He immediately approved the memorial. Using the red pen that Jin Ying had prepared, he approved it and the matter was settled. It was worth mentioning that Zhu Qiyu had originally wanted to announce the edict in front of all the officials. However, Yang Chendong did not appear after winning the battle. Perhaps he wanted to keep a low profile. However, no one knew that he did not want to see Zhu Qiyu. Otherwise, he would have to kneel and kowtow. With his current strength, there was no need for him to be so humble. Yang Chendong did not come to see the emperor. The imperial edict had to be announced by someone else. It just so happened that Jining had some matters to discuss with him. She accepted the task and brought a group of embroidered uniform guards and young eunuchs to Yang Manor. The battle was over. Yang Chendong's goal had been achieved. Because of this, they were fortunate enough to follow the sixth young master to Yang Manor. By the time Jining arrived, everyone was having a meal. When Yang Si, who was in charge of guarding, saw that it was Jining and the others, he quickly reported the situation to Yang Chendong. "They're here so quickly." Yang Chendong, who was drinking wine and eating meat with Long Feng and the others, chuckled. He casually waved his hand and said, "Then why don't we invite them here to announce the edict?" Here? A trace of worry flashed through Yang Si's eyes. Like a shadow, Tiger Mane, who followed beside Yang Chendong, knew what Yang Si was worried about. It was none other than Long Feng. If they saw that their sixth young master had to kneel to someone else, It was inevitable that they would not be able to accept it and cause trouble. In fact, how could he not have such worries? However, since this was the sixth young master's intention, there was no room for doubt. He immediately glared at Yang Si and said, "If the young master tells you to go, then go. Why are you being so long-winded?" Yes. Yang Si saw that Tiger's mane was angry. It was said that they were usually under this person's management. After a trace of panic appeared on his face, he agreed and left. Yang Chendong patted Tiger's man's shoulder and gave him a look of approval and relief. Then, he continued to drink with Long Feng, Xiao Feng, Teng Shan, Wu Shang, and the other company commanders as if he hadn't heard anything. Not long after, Jining arrived. Along with him were 4 eunuchs and 8 masters of the embroidered uniform guards. Usually, when a eunuch went to an official's house to deliver an edict, as the recipient of the edict, they had to prepare an incense table in advance in order to show their seriousness. Some even had to burn incense and bathe in the ceremony. But today, there was nothing prepared. Yang Chendong was still wearing his casual and elegant green robes. He didn't wear his official robes, and the incense table wasn't set up. When Jining saw this, she couldn't help but frown. But it was only a slight frown, and she quickly relaxed. It wasn't for any other reason than the fact that the Yang family square was filled with mercenary soldiers in camouflage uniforms. Although there were only 400 of them, their combat power was unimaginable. Even defeating Walla had been done with the help of their powerful strength. Against such people, Jining had no chance of winning at all. It wasn't just him. Even the 8 masters of the embroidered uniform guards that he'd brought with him were on full alert. It wasn't that they were dissatisfied with Yang Chendong's lack of preparation before receiving the edict, but they were worried that these mercenaries would suddenly go on a rampage and hurt them. "Oh, it's Eunuch Jean. Come, have a drink with Marquis and the other meritorious officials." As soon as Jining appeared, Yang Chendong secretly observed her reaction. He found that she was indeed a little displeased, but she quickly suppressed her displeasure. Yang Chendong smiled inwardly. He wanted to use this method to remind him that he wasn't an ordinary marquis. There were some rules that couldn't be applied to him. If something went wrong and he went on a rampage, everyone's face would be ruined. Yang Chendong greeted Jining as if he were drunk. Jining couldn't help but look a little embarrassed. He wanted to scold Yang Chendong for not following the rules, but he didn't dare do so in front of all the mercenaries. He could only comfort himself. They had just won a great battle, so it was only right that they celebrate together. There was no need to argue with someone who was drunk. "Loyal Marquis, the Emperor has an edict for you. Please kneel and receive it," Jining said with a fake smile. He didn't directly respond to Yang Chendong's invitation to drink. Subconsciously, he seemed to be saying, "We aren't on the same side, so there's no need for us to drink together." "Oh, there's another imperial decree, but His Majesty is going to reward this marquis again." Ha ha ha. Since he was drunk, it was not a problem for him to act a little wild. He immediately laughed and stood up. Perhaps it was because he had drunk too much, but when he stood up, he almost lost his balance. If not for Ming, who was standing at the side, who was prepared and supported him, he would have fallen to the ground in an embarrassing manner. "I, Yang Chendong, accept the edict." Yang Chendong shrugged his shoulders and shook off Ming's arm that was on his body. With a plop, he fell to the ground, giving people the feeling that he was prostrating himself on the ground. Because of Jin Ying's appearance, all the mercenaries in the courtyard had stopped drinking and eating. The atmosphere had become much colder. But now, Yang Chendong had suddenly fallen to the ground and knelt to receive the edict. All the mercenaries stared coldly at Jin Ying and the other mercenaries. 10,000 swords piercing the heart was nothing more than this. At this moment, Jin Ying felt cold all over. It was as if he was walking in the snow without wearing anything. No, it was colder than that. It was a coldness that seeped into his bones. Jin Ying couldn't imagine why these mercenaries gave him such a terrifying feeling. Even as he panicked, he opened the Golden Dragon Edict with trembling hands. He read out the edict of acting patriarch Zhu Qizhen, rewarding Yang Chendong with the title of Duke of Loyalty. This was a rare moment when he was absent-minded while reading an edict. But at this moment, Jin Ying was really afraid. When he read the edict, he stuttered. He finally finished reading the edict. But when he looked at young Chendong, his lips were slanted and he was snoring softly. It seemed that he had fallen asleep. Jining didn't dare to be angry. Instead, he leaned forward with a gentle expression and said softly, "Duke of Loyalty, wake up. Wake up. I've finished reading the edict. Thank you, Your Majesty." Yang Chendong seemed to have been startled awake. He opened his eyes and spoke. Then, he rubbed his eyes and said to Jining, "You've worked hard, Eunuch Jin. How about this? Please enter the hall and rest for a while. After Marquis has bathed, we can sit down together." Jining had come here to have a good chat with Yang Chendong. Of course, he wouldn't refuse this opportunity. But he was very worried about whether Yang Chendong's mind was still clear. But no matter what, he had to agree. He noticed from the corner of his eye that the 400 mercenaries had already stood up and were looking at him with hostility. He couldn't guarantee that if he continued to stay here, he wouldn't be torn apart and eaten alive by these mercenaries. For his own safety, of course, entering the Yang family manor was the best choice. Okay. Since Duke of Loyalty is so kind, it would be impolite for me to refuse. With that, Jining followed Beta Persei into the outer courtyard of the Yang family manor. Yang Chendong left with them, but he was heading towards the inner courtyard of the inner courtyard. He really did bathe and change his clothes. Just as Yang Chendong, Jining, and the others left, someone among the 400 mercenaries shouted, "How can we allow others to blaspheme the 6th young master? We're going to seek justice from Emperor Ming." That's right. We want justice. In an instant, the anger in the hearts of many mercenaries was ignited. In their eyes, the 6th young master was a godlike existence. How could he kneel to others? When such a blasphemous thing happened, it naturally caused the crowd to be furious. It wasn't just the 400 mercenaries. Even Longsong, Xiaofeng, and the other battalion commanders were furious. They looked like they would explode at any moment and cause trouble for Emperor Ming. Enough. Everyone, sit down. A loud roar came from Hu Meng's mouth. This time, he didn't leave with Yang Chendong. He had stayed behind to stabilize the situation, even though the two of them hadn't communicated before. But after interacting with each other for so long, they already had a tacit understanding. When Yang Chendong left just now, he had given him an inconspicuous look, which made Tiger's man understand what to do next. With Tiger's man's shout, all the mercenaries' gazes fell on him. But when they saw Chief Tiger's body tremble, the anger in their hearts seemed to have been extinguished. But because they were angry, they didn't sit down immediately. What? If you don't listen to me, that means you don't listen to the 6th young master. Don't tell me you want to leave Cold Edge? Very well, if anyone wants to do that, step forward. I can do as you wish right now. Seeing that none of the mercenaries, including Long Song and the other battalion commanders, sat down, Tiger's man's eyes narrowed into slits. His anger was obvious. When they heard that they were going to be kicked out of Cold Edge, everyone's morale instantly dropped. Ever since they joined Cold Edge, there was a saying that followed them. Once in Cold Edge, always in Cold Edge. This was an honorable title that no one else had the right to take away. Unless they had committed a grave mistake, they wouldn't be kicked out of the meeting. But this someone else did not include the founder of Cold Edge, Yang Chendong, or the former head instructor, the current chief of the security bureau, Tiger's man. Everyone who joined Cold Edge knew of the 6th young master, Yang Chendong. Similarly, there weren't many who didn't know of Chief Tiger's man. It could be said that in the entire Yang Xianu army, if Yang Chendong was the Namboan, then the second place would definitely be Tiger's man. This position was hard to replace, no matter how many contributions others made. For example, the only army commander, Long Song, would feel inferior when he saw Tiger's man. Chapter 219. Now, Hu Meng had spoken, and he was speaking with Long Feng's qualifications and identity. How could the others dare to disagree? They immediately returned to their original stools with a rustling sound. Everyone quieted down, and Tiger's mane's eyes revealed a satisfied expression. I know that you are very dissatisfied with Ming Emperor's actions towards the 6th young master. But please remember, why did the 6th young master do this? Isn't it to create more time for you to develop? Everyone was originally from the great Ming dynasty. To you, many of your relatives and friends live on this land. If the sixth young master did not compromise and chose to go to war with the Ming army, who knows how many innocent souls would have been implicated and died? Among them might have been your relatives and friends. If that was the case, is this an outcome that you want to see? Tiger's mane asked the crowd in a powerful and resonant voice. Of course not. I think that no one wants to see their own people fight against their own people. In order to give us more time to develop, and in order to let more of the great Ming dynasty's people and Han descendants suffer less from the chaos of war, the sixth young master has been dealing with the Ming emperor in the capital. This is an act of sacrificing one's own family for the sake of everyone. I hope that everyone can understand. I also hope that today's matter will serve as a warning to all of you and give you a sense of urgency. If we can strengthen our strength earlier, then the sixth young master can avoid this punishment. Do you understand? Yes. Another uniform sound rang out, causing the ground of the entire courtyard to tremble. Very good. Now let's continue eating. Tiger's mane saw that he did not disappoint the sixth young master and spoke of the sixth young master's good intentions. He could not help but inwardly sigh in relief, and then threw a glance at Commander Long Song. Long Song immediately expressed his understanding. With his cooperation with the 3 battalion commanders, the atmosphere in the courtyard became lively again. However, although everyone did not say anything else, they all felt a surge of energy in their hearts. That was to perform better, so that the sixth young master could have the right to speak to Emperor Ming as an equal. In the side hall of the outer residence of the Yang family manor, Jean Ying had just sat down when a loud roar came from outside the door, giving her a fright. Originally nervous, he immediately stood up. From the looks of it, he was ready to run away at any moment. On the other hand, Beta Persei, who was in charge of leading the way, did not panic at all when he heard the shouts outside. When he saw how nervous Jean Ying was, he said nonchalantly, "It's fine. It's just a ritual for mercenaries to eat. You won't find it strange after hearing it so many times." Beta Persei's explanation made Jean Ying's body slowly relax. So that's how it is. This is really a strange rule. Ha ha ha, what kind of strange behavior is this? Yang Chendong, who had changed into a new green robe, strode in from the main entrance. At that moment, he didn't look drunk at all. Instead, he looked extremely spirited and sober. However, at this moment, Jean Ying did not care so much. Since the decree had been announced, was there a need to hold on to the past and not let it go? Seeing Yang Chendong walk over, Jean Ying laughed and stood up. "Congratulations, Duke of Loyalty. Haha, in the future, I can also call myself Duke of Loyalty, right?" Yang Chendong laughed heartily as he walked to the main seat in the side hall and sat down. When he sat down, he pointed to the first seat on the left and said to Jean Ying, "Eunuch Jean, you don't have to be so polite. Take a seat too." This action immediately caused Jean Ying's displeasure. Although he was only a eunuch, he was the head eunuch. However, he was the head of the eunuchs, the favorite of the emperor, and held great power in his hands. Usually, when he was with the other important officials, he would always be the first to sit before the others. At the very least, everyone had to be seated at the same time. This order of seating was not to be underestimated. It often represented the level of one's status. This was very particular. However, at this moment, Yang Chendong actually sat down first before allowing Jean Ying to sit down. He did not even say a word of invitation. The dominance of the landlord was as clear as day. Jean Ying was extremely displeased and looked around. When he noticed that there were only Yang Chendong and Beta Persei in the room, he thought that it would not be a loss of face if no one else saw him. Thus, he suppressed the anger in his heart and slowly sat down. Yang Chendong had deliberately neglected Jean Ying in order to suppress the other party's power. Now, it seemed that everything was going smoothly. With a certain amount of authority, Yang Chendong began to negotiate with Jean Ying. Although it was called a negotiation, it was actually a fight for benefits. According to his original plan, Yang Chendong proposed 3 conditions. First, the Yang family bank would officially open for business. After the capital, it would be promoted to the other major cities nearby. The imperial court would not be able to stop him, nor would it play any dirty tricks. In short, in the future, Yang Chendong would be a businessman, and a great one at that. If no one provoked him, he would not use his power to oppress others. Second, for his own personal safety. Of the 400 mercenaries, 200 would be left behind. 100 would be in the Yang family village, and 100 would be in the capital to ensure the safety of the immortal abode, heaven beyond heaven, in the Yang family bank. In the future, he would decide according to the situation whether or not to continue hiring mercenaries. On this point, Yang Chendong showed that he was rich and imposing. Third, Yang Chendong would not attend court, nor would he participate in court politics. He would also not participate in the matters between Daizong and Ingzong. He wanted to become a third party with a transcendent status. As for these three conditions, Daizong had already agreed to the first condition and had even said that he would deposit 500,000 taels of silver into the Yang family bank. There was no need to discuss it further. Jin Ing agreed immediately. As for the second condition, he could not doubt it either. The other party had money and could hire mercenaries, which could only make others envious. It was on the third condition that Jin Ing was dissatisfied with. She made a request on behalf of Daizong. That was, since he was the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, he should be on the side of Daizong. I saved Ingzong's life. It is impossible for me to completely cut off my relationship with him. Daizong has also treated me well. It is already not easy for him to not help either side. There is no need to say anything else. Yang Chendong shook his head and spoke with a resolute attitude. Jin Ing could see that Yang Chendong had no intention of backing down on these three conditions. After hesitating for a moment, she thought about how Walla had already retreated and did not need Yang Chendong to act for the time being. Since that was the case, not helping either side was not a bad choice. There was no harm in agreeing, but if she agreed, Jin Ing also raised three conditions. First, they would not help either side. Yang Chendong was only the Duke of Loyalty and had no other authority. Even his previous position as the commander of the embroidered uniform guards had to be removed. Since he was going to retire, he might as well retire completely. Second, Yang Chendong was not allowed to interfere with Daizong's relationship with the mercenaries. Jin Ing was very clear on this issue. He even said that he already knew that the Duke of Loyalty and the leader of the mercenaries had a good relationship. Jin Ing thought that after she said all this, Yang Chendong would at least look embarrassed and would even give an explanation. Unexpectedly, young Master Yang had no intention of speaking at all. Instead, he continued, "Let's talk about the third condition." The reason Yang Chendong did not care so much was naturally because he had purposely revealed everything that Jin Ing knew. Based on the fact that he had a good relationship with the leader of the mercenaries, it was clear that Jin Ing was ignorant. In reality, it was not just a good relationship. They were the same person. All right, the third condition is that since you are a merchant, you have to pay business taxes. This is also a matter of course. Of course, the great Ming army and embroidered uniform guards who have received the money will also protect the Yang family's business. Jin Ying's face was full of smiles. She seemed to be saying that if you pay taxes, you will naturally be protected. If you don't pay taxes, then sorry, but don't come looking for us when someone causes trouble. Yang Chendong had already considered the matter of paying taxes. He had even thought of a countermeasure. However, since Jin Ing had brought it up, he still had to fight for the rights and benefits. Oh, then how does eunuch Jin intend to collect the taxes? The Great Ming's laws require that agriculture be taxed at a 30:1 ratio, Jin Ing said in a probing tone. This was the result of a discussion with the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, the Minister of War, Yi Ming, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu. The three ministers all agreed that if they wanted to curb Yang Chendong's development, they had to collect business taxes. In this way, not only could they obtain a large amount of money to fill the national treasury, but they could also hinder Yang Chendong's development. In the Grand Great Ming, there was actually someone who could earn money faster than the country. If they didn't use any methods to restrain him, it would be incredible. That's impossible. Yang Chendong shook his head straightforwardly. I will not accept a 30:1 ratio. Yang Chendong's reply was so straightforward that it immediately checkmated Jin Ing. His face was first filled with anger, angry that Yang Chendong's attitude was so resolute. But when he thought of the benefits that could be obtained from this matter, he immediately said, "Fine, Then I don't know what the Duke of Zhongdan's opinion is. How much business tax should be collected? Yang Chendong appeared to be deep in thought as he said, although the laws of the Great Ming don't stipulate it, in reality, the rich and powerful don't have to pay taxes when they do business. It's just like how scholars don't have to pay taxes when they farm. Right now, you want to collect business tax from me. No matter how much you pay, it's not appropriate, right? How could Jining not understand the logic behind this? However, who told other people to do business and farm to support their families? But Yang Chendong was using this to develop his power? For example, the mercenaries he had hired were 200 people. According to the standard rate, it would cost 2 million taels to hire them. Looking at the entire Great Ming, there was probably no one else other than Yang Chendong who could take out this amount of money so easily. Even the imperial family would feel heartache if they took out this amount of money. Chapter 220. Since he had made his business so big, what was the big deal about collecting a little tax? It's not the same. Jining said, aggrieved. How is it different? Yang Chendong didn't seem to notice Jin Ying's aggrieved expression. Instead, he fiercely retorted, could it be that because this guild is making money, you want to collect taxes from me? Could it be that because I did so much to protect the capital, you want to collect taxes from me? If that's the case, there's no way you can justify it, right? Then I, Yang Bao, have no choice but to ask the people of the world, where is justice? Where was Yang Bao's justice? Jin Ying's entire body trembled, his expression ugly. Only now did he realize that Wang Zhan still had a powerful tool in his hands. Normally, even if the emperor's decree was announced to the world, it would still take time for the common people to learn of it. But Yang Bao was different. Wherever it appeared, the things recorded in it would quickly become known to all. He had even heard that in some places, when the local government had some rules, they would even use Yang Bao to spread the news. From this, one could see just how great his influence was. At this moment, Jin Ying was inwardly cursing Wang Zhan for being a pig. How could he have made Yang Bao legal back then? Now, the drawbacks had appeared. Alas, Wang Zhan was already a dead man. Cursing him now had no effect. It was better to think about how to resolve the matter at hand. In any case, he couldn't allow Yang Chendong to speak of the grievances and unfair treatment he had suffered. Otherwise, it would be a major blow to Daizong's image. Duke of loyalty and courage? Then what do you think should be done? This duke doesn't ask for anything else. You can deal with the business tax as you see fit. Even if it's 20 to 10, 10 to 1, Marquis will accept it. After all, this is for the sake of the country. But there is one condition that must be fair, and that is that this duke's business must be taxed, as well as other merchants and nobles. Otherwise, don't blame me for falling out with you. Yang Chendong kept saying that he was willing to pay an enormous price for the sake of the country, but his last request left Jining in a difficult spot. Yang Chendong was asking for fairness, and there was nothing wrong with this. However, if he really did that, he would offend countless influential people. In the past, when Ingzong was here, he only said that he wanted to collect taxes, but he never carried it out. What's wrong? Now that you've taken the throne and won the battle to defend the capital, you want to make an example out of the nobles and merchants? Isn't this a little too quick to get rid of the donkey the moment it outlived its usefulness? He thought that if he really took 30 to 1, he would lose the support of the people very quickly. Who knows how many people would go to Nanjing to seek refuge with Ingzong? This was not an outcome he wanted to see. However, they had no choice but to collect taxes. Originally, a country was divided into two, so the taxes would naturally be reduced by half. If they didn't think of other ways, once there was an emergency, it would be hard to say if there would be enough money to deal with it. Since they had to collect taxes, they could only think of a way based on the ratio. Jining had originally believed that he could use this to suppress Yang Chendong, but who would have expected that he would end up shooting himself in the foot? He could only reply with an unsightly expression. Fine, we'll do as the Duke of Loyalty says. Everyone who does business must pay taxes, whether they're merchants or nobles. As for the tax rate, why don't we set it at 100 to 1? 100 to 1. This was indeed a very low rate. This was also because the resumption of the business tax required a buffer. But in reality, this was not a very low rate for merchants. Merchants valued profit, and this sort of action of plundering them would most assuredly arouse the opposition of many. But at this moment, Jin did not have the time to consider such things. He only knew that if he did not reach an agreement with Yang Chendong, it would be even more difficult to raise the issue of collecting taxes in the future. Well said, well said. We'll do as Eunuch Jin says. As long as the other merchants pay the same taxes, I have no objections. Yang Chendong regained his smile, giving off the impression that he was very magnanimous. But Jining knew very well that this was just for show. This was because once the matter became related to all the merchants in the world, it would be impossible to raise the taxes even if they wanted to. Jining finally left, looking a little disheveled as he left. Although Yang Chendong was not even 20 years old, he gave Jining the impression that he was a little fox. It was as if this person knew how to read and already knew what he was going to say. He had already prepared countless countermeasures. He was really worried that if he continued to stay here, he would accidentally fall into the other party's trap and would have to pay a certain price. Fortunately, the trip to Yangjia village was not completely fruitless. Putting aside the agreement he had reached with Yang Chendong, when he left the village, Jining saw Lung Song, the leader of the mercenaries, waiting by the roadside. When he saw Lung Song standing by the roadside in his camouflage uniform, Jining hurriedly stopped the sedan and welcomed him with a joyful expression. Oh, it's Leader Lung. I didn't know you were waiting here. I've kept you waiting. It's fine, Lung Song said expressionlessly. I've been waiting here for Eunuch Jin to fulfill my promise with you. Now that the war is over, when will the 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron that Emperor Ming promised be delivered? I've already prepared the advanced firearms that you requested. When he heard that the advanced firearms were already prepared, Jin Ying's face lit up with joy. Well said, well said. The 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron have already been prepared. But how will we transport them out? That's simple. You can use the Yang family's commercial transportation system to transport them out. I've already discussed this with the Duke of Loyalty, Lung Song said. Hearing that this had already been arranged, Jining nodded in agreement. All right, then I'll hand them over to the Duke of Loyalty. Oh, right. When will we be able to obtain the advanced firearms that Leader Lung mentioned? Knowing that this was what Jining was concerned about, Lung Song said without hesitation, when the copper and iron are transported out of the capital, it will be time to hand over the advanced firearms. Oh, right. There's one more thing that needs to be discussed with Eunuch Jin. This time, we've repelled the Walla's army, but we've also communicated with them. We'll be doing business with the Walla and have handed this matter over to the Duke of Loyalty. We'll have to trouble Eunuch Jin to take care of this matter. Of course, once this matter is settled, if Eunuch Jin has any personal requests in the future, I'll put in a good word for you in front of our leader. Lung Song said this expressionlessly, but it was rather grating to Jin Ying's ears. Leader Lung, you're doing this for this eunuch's sake. The Walla just had a fierce battle with our great Ming. It doesn't seem right for us to be doing business with them now, does it? Of course it doesn't. That's why it's us mercenaries doing business with the Walla. It has nothing to do with your great Ming. We're just borrowing your path. What's wrong? Does Eunuch Jin have a problem with this? At the end of his speech, Lung Song's face became very serious, as if he was very angry. No, of course there's no problem with this eunuch here. It's just that this matter is too big. This eunuch still needs to report this matter to His Majesty and let His Majesty make a decision. Jining wasn't foolish enough to offend the mercenaries, so she brought up Daizong's name. It's fine. This leader will still stay in the capital with my brothers for a few days, so we can listen to what your Ming Emperor has to say. But if Ming Emperor doesn't give us a satisfactory answer by the time we leave, then I'm sorry, but I can't guarantee that we won't accept the mission when someone else pays us money to deal with the great Ming. How could Lung Song not see that Jining was delaying? Since that was the case, he took the initiative to propose a deadline. Jining could tell that there was another meaning behind his words. Leader Lung, you mean that the mercenaries won't attack our great Ming? It's not that they won't attack, but that Ming Emperor has agreed to our conditions, so he will naturally take care of his business partners. Unless someone is willing to pay several times the price to deal with you, we won't accept the mission. Lung Song nodded and then shook his head. In short, he had thrown out the benefits, but he didn't say that he was dead set. Good, good. If that's the case, Ming Emperor should be able to agree. Jin Ying heard another meaning in his words. She had long heard of the high cost of hiring mercenaries. If it was several times the price, there probably weren't many people who could afford it. With these conditions, it shouldn't be difficult to convince Zhu Qiyu. Your Ming Emperor should have agreed. Once Walla does business with us, their focus might shift. At that time, I'm afraid they won't have any designs on the Great Ming. Lung Song nodded as if he was giving her advice. Yes, yes. Jining nodded, then looked left and right. When she saw that there was no one around, she carefully moved in front of Lung Song and asked, Leader Lung, since Walla can work with your army, can we work together? Lung Song looked at Jining alertly. Eunuch Jin, I've said before that the Duke of Loyalty and our leader have a very good relationship. You shouldn't have such ideas. Even so, it's best that you don't say such things in the future. Otherwise, if you cause any trouble, even I won't be able to bear it. All right, I'll take my leave now. Long Song left, leaving Jining standing there alone. Her expression changed again and again. She had previously thought that Yang Qindong's relationship with the leader of the mercenaries was not bad. However, from the probing just now, it seemed that their relationship was far better than she had imagined. It seemed that it was best not to offend this Duke of Loyalty in the future. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.